Hello and welcome to the DPC show. My name is Dan Offen, aka Mr. Big Jams. In this show, I'm going to be taking you through the highs, the lows, and everything to know about all 6 DPC regions. And to help me with this, I've enlisted 6 of the world's top Dota analysts to talk you through their respective regions in enough detail so that you'll be able to stay on top of the DPC. We're going to be kicking off pretty shortly with T Governor, who's going to be covering the EU region. But before then, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I can be found at Daniel Offen, and that's spelled Daniel, then O-F-F-E-N. And if you would like to financially support me for creating this show, you can find a link to my Patreon in the episode description. I'm going to be keeping things pretty lean, so let's kick off straight away with T Governor in EU. Okay, so just to kick off, let's talk through what you see as the top teams in the EU region. I think that will probably be an obvious question to a lot of people, but for anyone who's been living under a rock for a little while.
I got the easy job, right? Other regions, if they think about it, I'm just like, okay, of course, OG Secret, probably, top 2, then Liquid's quite up the rear, Enigma, they, have their good days, but no, for sure, it's like the 4 invites, right? It's as easy as that.
Do you think EU as a region is closer than that? Is there a very clear top 4 for you and then the bottom 4 below that are a little off, or do you think it's a relatively close 8?
I actually think it's quite a divide between the 4, like kind of the top 4 and the bottom, because the shift since when DPC started, like Mud Golems isn't really Mud Golems anymore. Chicken Fighters is kind of 2 teams torn apart now back in type 1, and then Alliance has forever been a bit shaky. And in Viking, I think they had a really strong showing at the end of the last season, but they qualifying for this event, they beat Hippomaniacs, which was arguably like one of the weakest teams inside the tournament. And then they won 2-1 to Chicken Fighters. So they're kind of like, again, going to be the underdogs. And I think, yeah, for sure, it's like that top 4, and then Alliance and Viking will be fighting their way to enter that. And then Mudglums and Chicken Fighters will be kind of like the 2 true underdogs of the tournament. But yeah, I think there's quite a clear divide between the top and bottom of Europe right now.
Let's look at what most people would say is the favourite of the tournament, Team Secret. They've obviously had an incredible year. They've won close to everything, 3-0 in every single finals. I think they probably tailed off a little bit towards the end of the year. Do you think that's burnout, or is there a chance that represents some sort of problem with the team?
No, I think when you play so much online Dota, you do kind of get to a point which is like, what are we playing for? What's the reason? Where, like, other than money and fame, like what's our end goal? So I think for sure you can have some burnout there, and you can see it with the players as well. They were going on breaks, like Matumba Man. I like looking at his pubs. He wasn't really playing much at all. He's just having like chill, relaxed time. And I think that was mainly a product. And that's why we saw teams who didn't really find massive success in tier 1 tournaments finding it. Like Viking, for example. They're a great group of lads, and they dominated the very tail end of the season. And that's why I think I put them a little bit lower in my rankings, because it's like Secret kind of put their foot off the gas. Viking, they were able to put their foot on and recommit. So I think there will be kind of another strong showing from Secret, but I'm happy. I will be so happy to see if they just kind of slide a bit down and we see a new team rise up. Like 2020 was a bit boring for EU Dota.
If Secret are going to dominate, who do you need good performances from? Where do you think their play style is going to build from?
I think it's just their ability to find victory in like every game is just so scary. Their patience and discipline is just like second to none. Like, they will happily give you parts of the map and make you think that you're winning the game, and then suddenly they've just like smoked into you and killed you. So it's just the cohesion of the team. I wouldn't attribute it to a single player, but like it's the work that they put in as an entire roster. Every single player is like grinding their pubs, watching these other games, other regions, and then you can see it in the game, because like when these scenarios come up, weaker teams, they don't know how to deal with the scenario. But there's always, you can see there's one player who comes up with the idea or the formula to deal with that problem. So yeah, I wouldn't attribute it to a single player. It's just them as a team, and also their coach as well. Like, they are just a monster to deal with when they're all acting at 110%.
Mm-hmm. This would be the first time we've seen them play in a while. They've not really been in a tournament since early December, I think. Is there anything that in this new patch you think we can expect to see from them, or is it very hard to predict at this point?
I think it's kind of hard to predict, but you have to look towards all what the tier 2 and tier 3 scene's doing right now, because they're the ones playing in these online tournaments and kind of showing a bit more. They obviously had to qualify for DPC, while some of these teams didn't. So I think we'll be looking at that. Like, for example, like Ricky has been one of the top heroes right now. Monkey King's been kind of showing a little bit. And for sure, it's going to be, they're going to have their own flair. But yeah, it's whatever tier 2 and tier 3 is doing right now. Look at that, and then just add about 20x skill, and then that's what's going to happen.
Excellent. Let's move on to OG. I think a lot of a fan favourite, obviously, 2 TI winners in that team, and they're a very exciting team to watch. But perhaps towards the end of last year, they maybe tailed off a little bit, or they were going through difficult times. How would you expect them to perform here?
I think they're going to have an unrivaled amount of confidence in which, when a new patch drops, they are one of the few teams that look at the entire, like they said it in an interview, I think during one of the tournaments, they look at the entire hero list and they'll try and find a reason to be able to execute it and to get it into their draft. And some teams, they look at meta and they go, well, this is good, we have to play this. This is available, we have to pick it. And I think OG is one of the few teams that really just kind of keeps every hero open. So I think they might have fell off the end of last season, but that's because they weren't really, again, like they said in another interview, they weren't really pushing themselves to find what was the broken stuff. What was like, they had the Morph ES, they had kind of a couple cute things, but they didn't have like the OG style that they wanted to crush tournament with. And I think when you've had a month of like nothing and the patch has been dropped, all the players are playing their pubs, like they're going to come into this tournament with the OG flair, that mentality, their boot camp, you know, they're probably in Portugal right now, chilling in that mansion, you know, they're doing their thing. Like they're going to have enough in their toolkit to really bring it out. And I think that's why, for me, I think Secret and OG, they're the two teams to really kind of look at entering this tournament, because OG will have the creativity and Secret will just have the fundamentals built in. Yeah.
People who haven't been watching non-DPC Dota may not be kind of fully aware of this OG lineup and what's different about it to what existed before. We've got kind of 2 new players here that people might not know so well, Mid1 and Saska. How do you think those 2 people have changed the playstyle of OG?
So I think Mid1, he's a very versatile player. He's just a lad who plays so many pubs, really grinds out and just has a really high mechanical kind of ceiling. And that just allows him to fit the philosophy. And OG as a team, once again, they're a team that once you get into the team, you're subscribing to their ideas, their ideology of playing Dota. Like if you have the mechanical skill, they'll teach you the fundamentals of actually how to play Dota. And normally when you go into the team, you're like, oh, wait, you're playing like this? This is the recipe? All right, thank you. You know, so I think as long as you have this high ability to mechanically play the game, you're going to join OG and suddenly become like a top tier pro. And I think Mid1, again, he's clearly been able to do that. He's previous success, joins OG. And then the 4 position player, you know, he's got too many S's in it for a guy with a slur to try and pronounce it, you know, Satsuka. But yeah, he's got like 3 or 4 accounts, all like top 10K, insanely good support player. And it's the same recipe, right? Insane mechanical skill. The foundation of OG is there with like that beautiful little recipe book. You know, you join and you read it, you're suddenly going to be great. So yeah, just 2 insanely good players joining a team with, you know, two TIs under the belt.
Mm-hmm. And the other 2 teams in that top 4 that perhaps are a little less of a sure deal, Team Liquid and Team Nigma. Let's go into Team Nigma a bit. They've been very inconsistent. Obviously, they're an incredible team helmed by some incredible players, but they've perhaps not hit that level that's been expected of them. Do you agree with that they're underperforming?
I think it's easy to say they're underperforming because when you look at the names, like you just said, you expect so much more from them. You know, they got top 2 at TI. They're it's Weehar, it's Miracle, Micro, GH, Croaky. I'll list them up. Why not? But like you want them to do so much better. But I think they so consistently are performing really well in tournaments, but they don't have that extra little something to get through to like the tail end of the tournament to like dominate it. And it's hard to say what that is because sometimes Weed dominates games, sometimes Weeds doesn't. You know, he's normally the scapegoat from the community, but they're like this band of brothers that stuck together. And you'd hope that they're going to be a really, really strong team coming out into this DPC because they have the same type of playstyle as OG, just with a little bit less creativity in the draft, but they can be ruthless. And that's what has helped them. But it's that lack of creativity sometimes that falls flat in a longer tournament where suddenly after, a month or 2, what they did on day 1 isn't helping them on, day, 41. So that's kind of the difference between like an Enigma or an OG or an Enigma and a Secret.
Do you think that will perhaps hurt them in this format, this long-running league format, where maybe they don't have the creativity and draft as OG and Secret because they have so much time to prepare? Maybe that won't be great for them.
It depends on this format's also kind of different where it's long, but the volume of games is very few, right? They're playing at most 1, maybe 2 best of 3s a week. for like 7 weeks. So sure, it's a long tournament, but it's not as if you're playing 3-4 series a week and you're really having to show everything. You've got a week to prepare for one best of 3. You win or you lose. You go back to the drawing board, you go again, right? Like, I think this format actually plays really well for teams that don't have that big playbook, because you have 4 or 5 scrim days leading up to one official match. Like, it's hard not to prepare correctly for that series. And if you aren't preparing for that series, then something's gone wrong. But with these teams that we're mentioning, they already have the infrastructure built in to succeed in those scenarios. They have the coach, they have, the manager helping them, their organizations. We're not talking about stacks at this point. So I think we aren't going to see too many weaknesses from these teams because, again, like I said, there's so much time. There's not a lot of official matches during DPC. So it's all down to what happens on the day. And maybe your prep's a little bit wrong and maybe you're off on that day, but the physical strategy side of it, that should be perfected unless there's something deeper going wrong. But again, these teams are like top 4 in EU. That shouldn't be happening.
And Team Liquid at that kind of the tail end of that top 4, they're a team I think that a lot of people have been saying, especially myself, that this is the time they need to step up. They've been a potential team for so long and they've had such incredible results occasionally, but occasionally they've been a little inconsistent. Is that an analysis that you agree with?
I think, I'd agree. It's always a team where you look at it and go, I want them to do well. I really do. But like, there's something a little bit missing. I think for Liquid, they had that true creativity in role swapping and the approach to the game, which put a lot of people off guard. And that's really where, if they have that same kind of ideas coming into DPC, then they could easily just surprise a lot of teams. And I mentioned in that previous question, the idea of you have such a long time to prepare. If you have not only hero changes, role changes, play style changes, like all these factors being changed for one best of 3, a week-long prep, a team like Liquid could easily rise up to be one of the best in EU because they have more factors and variables to change, unlike these other teams where they're kind of limited in how far their creativity can go. So this is why I think Liquid for sure 100% a strong top 4 in this tournament, but in DPC cycle. But again, it's, have they put in the legwork to really get to that level, or are they going to fall victim to where in previous times they kind of have some foundation of their draft and they normally stick to it until they get creative? And if they haven't found that kind of flair before the DPC starts and they waste 3 or 4 weeks trying out their kind of bread and butter, suddenly it's too late for them to strive for top 4 because they've wasted the first part of the DPC. And that's what happens in these previous tournaments. They kind of waste the first 2-3 weeks with some stuff, and then they're going to have that eureka moment, and then suddenly they're the best. And hopefully they come in with their top strategy straight away, or at least the ideology straight away.
Do you think if they struggle for these first couple of weeks, is it kind of almost over for them as a top team, or do you think they'll have time to pull it around?
I think they have time to pull it around. They've proven in previous tournaments that the first 3 weeks for them actually just make the tournament more enjoyable because their backs against the wall, and then they suddenly play 10 times better. So I think that's why you can't really write them off, and that's why they will always be a strong contender for top 4, because unlike other teams, when they are kind of feeling down, they have that ability to pick themselves back up, find out things that they need to improve on, suddenly swap a thing, and now they're dominating. So this is where, like OG Enigma Secret, you expect them to do well from day one. Liquid, it's kind of 50-50, but then once they do find their groove, they're easily just one of the scariest teams for sure.
Let's go into Alliance briefly. I think Alliance are an exciting team, but they've maybe been a bit disappointing for a lot of people. Their results have been subpar. Maybe they've had a lot of kind of last placey type finishes or mid-range type finishes. Do you think that's an underperformance for that team, or considering the context of EU being such a strong region, are they about in the right place?
Yeah, I think they're about in the right place just because they haven't had that kind of something to really push them deeper into owning top 4. It's hard to describe what really holds them back, but they feel like they are such a lane dominating team where they want to try and bully you. And if they haven't bullied you, they don't have so how are we winning this game? And that's where against tier 2, tier 3 teams, like you saw in the Decider tournament, they owned it. They crushed their lanes, they own the game, they win. But when you see them against higher tier teams, were they able to fortify positions, or are they able to, maybe play the map a little bit smarter? Suddenly Alliance fall victim to an underfarmed S4 or a Limp who's maybe over-rotated, or suddenly the supports have kind of failed some early rotations, or they haven't been able to take that first mid-tier 1 in that early move, and their kind of big picture team plan isn't really there. So I think for Alliance, they're a little bit too reliant on some of their key philosophies, and like I said, against these top tier teams, they understand them. They pick them apart and off they go. So they're just kind of lacking that, I guess, the fallback plan. I think it's the best way of describing it.
Nico Baby, I think, is one of the most exciting carries in the region. He's very, very explosive carry. He's great to watch, and he does carry alliance sometimes. Do you think they need a great Nico Baby performance to go through this, or is it about improving the depth and quality throughout the team?
I think, Nico Baby for sure. It's without him, I don't know where Alliance would be. I think they'd probably be 1 or 2 ranks lower in EU for sure. I think he is by far an amazing carry player. But yeah, it's basically getting the entire team subscribing to the same idea and being able to execute it time and time again, because they are, when they execute, they are able to just demolish. Like, again, I referenced at the side of tournament, some of the drafts they had there, like we played them Hellbear Smashes and we got destroyed because they just had this read on us and this ability to pick the right heroes, and this pacing of the game was too high. And like I said earlier, it's just that only works so far. That can only carry you so far in the tiers of Dota, and it's a great idea for tier 2, lower tier 1 tournament or gameplay, but they don't have that kind of team understanding or team something to really go, we're going to own this game. And the only times they do own those games at tier 1 is when Nico Baby whips out a 1v9 PA situation with a rapier, or he's some unkillable Wraith King on like 24 pick, but for sure they are a great team. And I think if once they have that extra kind of plan or strategy in mind, that's when we can maybe recognize them as another top 4. But for now, happily we'll put them like 5th, 6th in this tournament or this cycle.
Let's move from Alliance to, I think, their slight rivalry caused by a Fatter and 33 Mud Golems. That's a team. What I briefly wanted to cover was the stability in EU. We've just covered 6 teams whose rosters have not changed in almost a year now, I think. Whereas Mud Golems and Chicken Fighters have both shifted a little bit. So talk me through this new Mud Golems roster and what people can expect from them.
So Mud Golems, they've of course now picked up 9 on mid lane instead of Boromir, and they've now got Biver instead of
Milan.
Whew, man, my memory went for a second, but yeah, it's instead of Milan. And I think it's a fun, creative new flair to Mud Golems, because the changes aren't too like left field. It's not as if they're changing a 4 player with a new role. Like Biver is a very good mechanically skilled 4 player equal to a Milan. And if anything, I look at that swap just being like an attitude change, like let's look away from Dota for a second and let's look at what the player brings to the team. And potentially the difference between the two might just be like how they approach talking about the game. Are they more of a captain role? Are they more of like a listener? Like, do they like following the strategy? And that's where I think Mud Golems, their changes, it's less about, oh, but Boromir, he carried us before. Or, oh, Milan, he's so good at 4. It might just be 33 and Fada are trying to captain the team, and these 2 players might have too much of an opinion on the game, and suddenly you've got like 4 captains instead of 2 potentially, and then the likes of a 9 and a Biver, where they kind of happily have sat in the kind of the shadow of previous teams before but played well. That might be what Mud Golems need, and it's hard to say because they haven't really shown much yet playing a decided tournament. But I don't mind the changes for sure. It's a refreshing new look to Mud Golems. But again, it's not. I don't look at the roster and go, oh, what have they done? It's just, oh, sure, it's just swap for swap. Why not? Let's see what happens.
So 9 and Biver might be more aware to people. People might have seen him in enough stuff. But 9, I don't think, has come up so much. In EU, he was in North America for a little while, wasn't he? On J-Storm, I think? Or am I misremembering?
No, you're right. Yeah, he. There was a phase, I think, in like tail end of 2019 where a lot of European players tried to hop the pond and join DPC through NARSA, and 9 was one of the EU players that did do that. He played in Business Associates and J-Storm, and he kind of like played around NA for a little bit. But him and Skeeter, they have like a big history of playing together, I believe. So that's kind of just like a reunion of the 2. And then same again for Biver. I think, he's played with these guys before. So it's kind of like, oh, wait, we need a new player. Should we go for that mate that you used to play with back in the day? Yeah, bring him in. Why not? So yeah, it's like players that have had history before, but like they've not been like the top of a region before. They're not really dominated too much. They've just consistently been like strong showing. And for EU, it's going to be very hard for them to really show up. I think any team with Fada on it, they have like a great start entry to a tournament, a month of amazing, and then it slowly peters off. So I think Mud Golems, again, they might have that 1 month of dominating, and that month alone might be enough for them push them into like the top 4 position. But it's always hard because Boromir, he was godly. He was like the Nico Baby was for Alliance for Mud Golems. He owned some games. So I think 9 is a more of a supporting mid lane where he's more active and tries to open up the game for his team. So potentially that shift might put more pressure on 33, playing some of his heroes to be quirkier. And the style of my Golems might change a lot. But again, it's just so fun to see roster changes, because when the core stays the same and it's only a couple elements changing, you can kind of like theorize how it's going to change. So yeah, I look at this Mud Golems team, I'm like, you know what? I don't hate it, but I miss Boromir a little bit. But we'll see if 9 can really pick up the pieces.
Fair enough. Let's move to close up onto the lower division. From these, I imagine your team, Hellbear Smashers, would be your favourites to go up. Are there any other teams that people should be looking out for?
Mate, the lower division, it's kind of like, you know what, before I talk about my team, I come to a realization that EU and CIS was the reason why open qualifiers was really, really hard. And I mean, like, their tier 2, tier 3 scene is actually insanely strong. Like, they're not ever able to really compete tier 1 style, but like they hold down the fort on open qualifiers. And for EU, we don't have any teams or stacks or anything. We are actually a mess. We need to pick up the pieces on that, because like I look at this lower division, and in no way am I, flaming any of these stacks, but I think we've got like 4 teams that are pretty scary, and then 4 stacks that could easily be cycled out each time. Like it's just open, because again, like I said, they're a stack. And to your question, I'll give you an answer. Spider Pigs, Brame, Creep Wave, and Hellbear Smashers, I think they're the top 4. And I think, Hippomaniacs, Bourgeois, No Bounty Hunter, and Meta 4 Pro, they might have a time to showcase some games, but I think they're going to be really battling it out for just kind of survival. And maybe they find some momentum, but this lower division, it's going to be wacky. It's going to be wild. It's going to be inconsistent. So I might have said there's 4 teams that are good and 4 teams that aren't so good, but realistically, it's the lower division. We don't really have many good teams. So it's the Wild West. I'm ready to see, Meta 4 Pro rise up and become the next team.
We can all look forward to that. I wanted to ask actually briefly about the split from CIS. Obviously, EU's been playing in the same region effectively as CIS for almost a year now, or over a year almost. Do you think the move away from playing with CIS on a regular is going to change the meta at all?
I think no, because it actually changes the idea of how you practice for the tournaments. Before, when you emerged, you just kind of scrim anyone. But now, like the lower division teams, suddenly, let's say EU lower division, you now want to scrim the CIS upper division, right? Because you don't really want to play against your lower division teams, and the upper upper EU teams don't really want to scrim you, right? Because you're a lower division team. They might give you a 1 best of 2 a week or whatever. So it actually forces the teams to practice the opposite region a lot more, which then forces like your meta to actually still kind of be aligned somewhat, because you're kind of still playing the same practice games. When you go to officials, there might be like, obviously it's EU, but I think there will be some flair difference. Maybe like a Night Stalker might rise up in CIS, or the Ricky might become EU. But in the practice department, everyone should be aware of everything, and it'll just be if a region chooses to want to pick it up. But there should be no real surprises.
Okay, it's good to hear. Let's close up then by looking for the matches of Division 1 for this week. Tomorrow on January 19th, we've got Liquid versus Viking GG and Mud Golems versus Secret. On the 20th, we've got Alliance versus Nigma. And on the 23rd, we've got Chicken Fighters versus OG and Liquid versus Nigma. Are there any particular games there that you'd point out that time-strapped people should definitely make time to watch?
So I think to start with, Secret Mud Golems, because of course Mud Golems before in history have beat Secret before. And I think the first showing of Secret after a long break, and especially after the burnout, is always going to be enjoyable. Like, what is their angle? And every team basically looks to Secret to go, what are you saying is the meta? So this is the meta. You pick this Dark Willow 5 sudden. Okay, let's copy that. Let's go, So I think Secret for sure is like the meta setters normally, because they're normally the best. So that's a go-to series. And then I think for closest and competitive, I think Alliance Nigma. They're both teams that are kind of on the fringe of like Nigma could easily be like that 4th place team. Alliance wants to be that 4th place team. So that'll be the closest, most enjoyable series in my opinion. And but then again, the answer is they're all going to be great, Mr. Big Jams. They're all amazing. It's the upper division EU. Go watch them all. There you go.
Excellent. Of course, we'll all watch No Bounty Hunter versus Hellbear Smashers on January.
Exactly. Yes, well. That is in the evening. Highlight. Yeah, get your popcorn ready, even a bevy or 2, because it's in the evening. Drink responsibly. Yeah, I think that could be a good series too.
Okay, great.
I hope.
Oh, yes, you would. We'll leave it there then. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Thank you to T Governor for taking us through Europe. I think that was a pretty great start. You can follow T Governor on Twitter, of course, at T Governor, Governor spelled Guvnor. We're going to be rocketing, however, straight away to China, where Kips is going to take us through proceedings there. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through what you see as the top teams in the region.
So the top teams in the region, 100% Elephant, followed closely by PSG LGD. And like for people who haven't followed China really, you have to be very aware that LGD is actually pretty much a completely new roster. Everyone who was in the in the true sites has since moved on. 2 of the players are actually on Elephant right now. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, LGD held the top spot of the region at the start of, let's call it, the season, just after TI, where TI would have normally been. And it's been Elephant recently. And Elephant is, of course, it's the super team. Everybody's hype about Elephant.
It's interesting. A lot of people who are watching this may not have followed China since the last major, so over a year of not following the region. Would you say that every team is now somewhat unrecognizable from what they were before, or do you think there are some teams that are consistently still the same?
I mean, the top players are still the top players. Well, like I started with Elephant just now, right? So you still have, and I'm going to take a quick peek to make sure I don't get this wrong. Yeah, so you still have Eurus, you still have Somnus, you have Yang, you have FY, a lot of my personal favorites in there, but then you also have Red Panda on that team. And I think for a lot of Europeans, that name just doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. But Red Panda is not just, an accident. He's been around in the Chinese scene. He's been on Keen Gaming, their Promise team, and then their main team for over 2 years now. And he's also, man's 25. This is not like some 17-year-old rookie that they plucked out of matchmaking like you see in EU sometimes. And then, oh, Lord, I have to play with the big boys now. No, this guy has been around.
So why do you think it's taken him so long to join the team? Why? Because he's doing great on Elephant. Why has he been a captain who we've not seen before, who now is suddenly on the top team?
I mean, I wouldn't want to call him a captain here for sure. It's more like they needed a +5 player. And I think it specifically works well because he's experienced enough to not be intimidated while still stepping aside for others. Because FY is going to be captaining that team, no doubt. And in that case, you just need someone who listens well, who knows what he's doing, who's technically capable, and who can learn immediately from all of these big players that he's got around him, instead of, younger players sometimes have this, and I like this about younger players too, but sometimes they're like, no, I've done it this way, we're going to do it this way. And I don't think that would fit in well in a super team like Elephant.
So how would you expect Elephant to play? How have they been playing? Is it very similar to the old PSG LGD? Kind of a very built around Somnus / maybe and good fundamentals, or are they a slightly different beast to what we might expect?
Slightly different beast. Like, they definitely now have the capability to play on all 3 cores, although I would say that Yang definitely has a bit more of a subordinate role there. But Paparazzi, Eurus, is one of those carry players. Like, I'm a huge fan of this man, especially previous batch with his carry Mars build. Back when the Aghanim Scepter was just more bonk, this man used to go Desolator, BKB, and just Aghanims and bonk people. All team fight long, and they burst into pieces. It was glorious to see. But he can play this really fast game as well, compared to a lot of other carries who are mostly there for securing the late game. So they have this very nice duo where either of them can secure the later game, and Paparazzi is so good at those early rotations, you don't necessarily need to play on Somnus anymore.
Wonderful. And let's go back into the new PSG LGD. How can we expect a team like that to play? Are they, because you're saying that the dominant team in the region, from those players, I know Arme and Fifth Beyond relatively well, and the others are a little bit new to me. So what can we expect from that team?
So as for Nothing to Say, Jinq, Y, I gotta say I'm not too keen on them right now either. Most of my personal following has been for the teams that are up and coming right now, as opposed to those tournaments further back. So I'm going to have to disappoint you a little bit there.
Fair enough. But
as,
where would you say their dominance has come from? Is it from the skill of their players? Are they well drilled? Just from what you've seen, little bits.
skill of players mostly. Like in general, China plays. A lot of people say disciplined. I would say structured. Because a lot of these teams in the tournaments that I've watched previously, there is definitely tilt going on. There's definitely impulse plays. But the basic rules for how to play the game are very solidified in China. You see the same rotations. You see the post fours always checking the runes. There's a certain way they attack the Radiant mid tower, a certain way they take the Dire top tower, etc. And I think in that regard, you're going to do well in China if you follow those rules really very well with high quality players. And after that, it all depends on who got to eke out, the small details there, and then who goes better into the team fights in the mid game.
Let's cover some of the other teams, because we mentioned PSG and Elephant there. There are obviously 6 other teams in this upper bracket. Do you think any of these teams could make a good showing, or do you think it is a 2-horse race between those 2 teams?
Like for the top spot, probably. But the lower spots, actually, my favorite team that's in this race right now is Team Magma, who have come up during the Decider tournament. They have played some incredible Dota. They've played some incredible comebacks as well. It's been extremely entertaining. And a big fan of their post 4 as well, Mian Mian. He had at least one game on a puck where he completely shut down Emo from IG. It was it was painful to watch if you're an Emo fan. But that guy, and then in general, actually all of the post 4s that came up through this Decider tournament. I said before that China has this not discipline but structure going on, and in that structure, it's the post 4 that really gets the freest reign. And I think that right now that makes China really a position where the post 4 shine, because these are the players that can improvise. And every single one of these. So I named Mian Mian, but there's also Boba Guys back. You might be familiar with that name. He's named Borax right now.
I was trying to find him in my notes, but there we go, Borax.
Yeah. But there's also Kachu on LBCS, who's really great. Kaka is back. And of course, on the top teams, you have FY, PYW, Fade, and Shin-Q. All really big names. But I think the post 4s are really what's going to shine here.
Okay. Do you think that's different to a lot of regions? Because is China now a post 4 region, whereas EU you may point to, I think, a wider range of positions that are more important?
Yeah, I think that in EU right now and CIS, it's still very mid-dependent, those early mid-rotations. And in China, you don't necessarily see those all the time right now. It's a bit more, as I said, it's very structured. It's a bit more passive. They won't really go to random lanes. You always go to the bot lane if you're Dire and to the top lane if you're Radiant, etc.
Mm-hmm. And eHome, that's got Fade and Xnova, who have been 2 of the most successful supports in China for the past couple of months. Have their results haven't quite matched what that potential is? Do you think they're a team that could really make a showing here, or are we less enthusiastic about them?
I'm a big fan of Chalice myself. Ajit is interesting. Normally, it's like if they're Malaysian and they go to China, I want to cheer them on. I of course, I started at Fnatic over in Malaysia. These Malaysian Chinese players are really interesting to me, but he's never been as convincing to me to say Afu, who made a really very good stint in China earlier. And then, yeah, I gotta say, as good as Xnova is, I don't see their mid XM as quite one of the best in the region. I'm not sure if he can measure himself against the likes of, well, Somnus.
And Vici Gaming, that's a team that's quite a few new players in there for me. Erica I've not heard of before. Ori has been around for a little while. Are they a team that exciting to you?
Well, they have been a little bit of a disappointment to me, mostly in the sense that with Erica, they're not quite getting the performance that they originally wanted to. But they're kind of stuck with Erica because they were originally going to bring in 23 Savage, who is a Thai player, of course. And there's problems with the language. And because of COVID, there was also problems with his visa. So even though he was already practicing Chinese for a long time, they were really planning on bringing him in. They couldn't actually in the end because the DPC was announced so suddenly. And more importantly, we knew it was coming, but that it would be so fast. after it was published was a surprise for a lot of people. And they didn't have time to bring in 23 Savage anymore. So Vici are now, I wouldn't want to say stuck with Erica. He's got a lot of experience from several training teams as well. But he has definitely been a weak link on his team. And I hope they'll be able to get more experience for him, support him well enough. They have a lot of talent otherwise on that team. But yeah, I feel like they definitely got the short end of the stick there as far as COVID is concerned.
Mm-hmm. And the two teams we've not talked about are Invictus Gaming, who, first of those, they're a team that are quite familiar to me. Their roster doesn't seem to have changed much since I last looked at it. They've been very consistent. I remember them being a very, very exciting team a couple of years ago. Are they still that high-tempo, aggressive team, or have they calmed a little bit over the year?
I think they've calmed a little bit. I'm personally a fan of Kaka from the old days. I think he's the only player on this planet who's allowed to play support Sand King. No, nobody else gets to do that. Kaka gets to do that. Also a big Phoenix player. But in the Decider tournament, they had a couple of wonky drafts. And then, well, I brought Mian Mian up before, where he completely played Emo out of the game. That was not the only game where Emo got completely outplayed. He's a very technical player, but they tend to draft too greedy because his hero pool is, around the Storm Spirit Morphling kind of side.
Okay.
So they don't always have enough space for him, and that ended up biting them in the butt a couple of times. Mm-hmm. So if they can keep that under control, yeah, these guys are experienced. They are routines, but they haven't exactly been in shape just yet.
Is that why they didn't get the invite to the top four of the region? They had to qualify, is it because of their lack of shape, or have their results not been up to par?
The results haven't quite been there, and with like the other four names up there, like some people had to go to the relegation tournament. Luckily, they made it out. You can't say the same for RNG, for example, which is a name that you'd probably expect in the top division, but they didn't manage to make it out.
I assume that's at the expense of LBZS, who is a team of 5 players who I don't think I've ever encountered before. Are there any standout players in that team for you?
LBZS? That's Catu, 100%. I mean, I said this is the post 4. Yeah. That man is one of those Earth Spirit players that can do anything with the hero, but I've also seen him absolutely own on Tusk, on Clockwork. He really likes these melee, real roaming heroes, and he's a treat to watch. Very aggressive.
Let's go a little bit into the playstyle and the meta that we can expect from the whole region. China, I think, like Southeast Asia, is quite an interesting case in that it's one of the only regions that's not been combined with another region totally over the COVID period. So SA and NA were effectively the same region. EU and CIS were effectively the same region for a long while. Do you think that's had an effect on the Chinese meta being different elsewhere, that more insular, or is it still picking up from... Can we expect to see similar things in China as we can in Europe, for example?
Yeah, but not quite for the reason that you'd expect. The thing with China is that because of the way that time zones work, what happens, and this always happens, is that China is simply first in the morning. So European players who wake up and go and watch some pro Dota usually get to see Chinese matches. A lot of the meta sort of trickles forward from there because European players might encounter each other in pubs and scrim each other, but on the other hand, they won't watch pro matches in their own region because that's when they're busy scrimming.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Usually metas that start to develop in China really come to fruition over in Europe. Although, for example, one of the things that I saw during the Decider tournament, which I'm not sure is going to make it over, is the critical mass Medusa.
Okay.
Are you a fan of Medusa?
I mean, I do I do love a Medusa, but I've not seen it in competitive for a little while.
No, well, in China, it's actually big right now. There's these Medusa. Previously, it was Venge drafts as well. And what they do is they just get Mask of Madness, Manta style, into either a Daedalus or sometimes a Rapier. They end.
Okay.
They'll buy back for that too. As soon as they hit that point in time, they're going to siege with the Medusa and they're going to end. It's been really big in China in the past couple of tournaments.
For a number of these teams with the new patch, this will be the first time we're seeing them compete on a very different meta to what we last saw them compete on. Is there any, aside from the Medusas you're mentioning and the sort of thing, is there anything else that we think we might expect to see brand new in this first couple of weeks?
Brand new, I'm not entirely sure. Like, the meta has definitely adjusted. We've seen a lot of Monkey King carry, a lot of Troll Warlord, and then on top of that, actually, because I think they value Terrorblade really highly, so do I. I think it's one of the strongest carries right now, which means that in response, you get a lot of Drow Ranger and Arc Warden picks, because that is sort of the response for that. So that is what the carry meta roughly looks like right now, apart from the Medusa drafts. And then on the support front, Nyx Assassin has been huge. I'm not sure if that's going to last now that he's been reined in a little bit. We've seen an absolute ton of Nyx Assassin over there.
That's interesting to hear. Let's go briefly to the lower division, which I believe is what you're covering kind of full time here. Are there Rural Never Give Up? We already mentioned. Are they the team that you'd expect to most easily make it out of this?
Yeah, definitely. And they've also been the highest quality, I think, of the teams that didn't make it through the decider tournament. DLG hasn't been that impressive. Phoenix was pretty good. I think they could have done better. Once again, one of those teams. Shiro is a really fun player over on Phoenix. He played a lot of Clinks the last time I covered him.
Okay.
Really aggressive Clinks play. I have no idea if we're going to see that again, but I'd love it. But that was the end of the previous patch when Clinks had that brief little flip in popularity.
Do you think the lower division in the China's strong? Because there's a number of regions like EU have an incredibly strong upper division, but their lower division, most people would say, is a little weaker. Is that they're the same drop off for China?
I don't think so, because they have much better talent development than Europe does. Like in Europe, if you develop talent, it means that I am the talent and I'm developing myself. And if in China you're developing talent, then you've been on 3 training teams, you've already been scouted, you've already been coached. There's a lot more structure to that. And I think that the players you're going to see here are going to also show that same kind of structured play, but maybe a bit less discipline. I've seen the same moves out of pretty much everyone, but with different heroes, different player styles, etc. So I think the gap's going to be a little bit less.
There's a couple of teams there that are made up entirely, not entirely, but mostly of players who don't have Liquipedia pages, which I think is how most Dota fans research who everyone is. Are there any players there that stand out to you that you'd like to highlight that people may have never heard of before?
That people may have never heard of before. That's hard, honestly, because the guys that I have covered are the ones, of course, in the Decider tournament. They were also in the Perfect World Leagues before. And those do have pages by now. So you could look them up. I think that, honestly, one of the most interesting players out of those that I would want to highlight is Device on DLG. Like, I found that they underperformed, but that was mostly because I'm an extremely big Device fan. He's one of those utility offlane players who played Snapfire before. I've also seen him do huge things on, for example, Centaur. One of those guys that always goes in, always makes the calls to do that. Hyper aggressive, absolute joy to watch. He's also been playing 4 recently, so maybe they're doing a little something Team Liquid flavored over there. But that is one of the players from the lower division that's absolutely a watch for. If his team performs well, then he is going to be the star for sure.
Just to close up on the predictions here, are there any predictions from upper division on who you'd expect to be struggling with relegation here? We've talked about your top 2, PSG, LGD and Elephant. Are there teams that you think could have been in the lower division and may return there?
Yeah, I think I've already said a little bit that I thought that AG looked wobbly. And I think that if they don't get that straightened out, they might see themselves falling down. The other one that I'm worried about is VG Gaming, because I'm not sure if Erica is going to hold up or not. We're going to have very few matches, actually. Like, you're just going to get to play everyone once, and if they slip up a couple of times too many, I'm not sure if they'd make it to relegation, but I'm pretty sure that several of the teams in the that came out of the Decider tournament could catch up to them.
Okay, and just to close up, let's look at the matches for next week that people can expect to see. In Division 1 on the 19th of January, we're kicking off with Vici Gaming versus LBZS, which are the Smiley Sun team. People may know them as already. We've also then got eHome versus Magma. On the 22nd of January, we've got PSG versus LBZS. And on the 24th, we've got Elephant versus IG and PSG versus Asta. From those matches, are there any, if people could only watch one, is there anything that you'd put out as a particularly great matchup here?
Ooh, like in terms of the matchup, like I think Avicii versus LBZS could actually be a very good tone setter for hey, this is LBZS, they won a Perfect World Championship, but are they actually going to make it with the big boys as opposed to Vici, who are the big boys? Are they going to hold up here under the pressure of a new young hungry team? But of course, if you want to see the big guys, then you're going to want to watch Elephant. And I think everyone wants to watch Elephant because the real question is, of course, how would Elephant hold up versus Secret right now? And everybody in their heads is already thinking about that because that's going to be the big match of the major when it comes eventually.
Okay, we'll watch out for that then. I think that's all we've got time for, so thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to Kips for taking us through China. Kips is, of course, one of my absolute favourite analysts. I think you should follow her on Twitter at Kipsul, and that's pronounced and spelt Kipspul. We, however, are going to rocket away straight away to North America, where we're joined by Neff. So just to start, talk me through what you see as the top teams in NA for this season.
Okay. The top teams in North America this season, it's got to be the number one team everyone was looking at is 4 Zoomers. They've been looking incredibly strong. They've been consistently playing. While Quincy Crew and Evil Geniuses were on break, they were the top dogs out of North America, without a question. Sad Boys, they look like they could take a couple of games off of them, but they just don't have the experience, the coordination yet. The stack was thrown together last minute. Believe it or not, I think that the people at Summit didn't know that 4Fun had disbanded, and they needed to find a replacement last minute for BTS Pro Series 4. So they reached out to Sad Boys and just kind of had to throw them in there. A lot of South American teams were angry about that one because Infamous didn't end up getting the invite there, and they just came in second, runner up to Quincy Crew at the Valve sponsored tournament before that, which was Realms Collide, The Burning Darkness. Evil Geniuses, they're having a boot camp right now. They are all several of them are in the United States. I don't know about the status of the entire roster. They only found out last minute, just like everybody else, they were actually participating in the DPC. The announcements were very last minute. Everybody was panicking, as I'm sure everyone's aware. The CEO of OG actually posted on a Twitter post of mine saying that he had no idea what was going on. I think that was at the very end of December.
Dear, yeah.
If OG doesn't know, then everyone else is in pretty rough shape. Quincy Crew, I would say the strongest team in the region. They took a little bit of a break. I think they had gotten bored of Dota and bored of being the top dogs for so long. They had a bit of a rough showing in Realms Collide. Prior to that, they'd only ever dropped like 1 or 2 matches in the last 5-6 tournaments out of North America. Absolutely insane team. I got the chance to interview Lelis. I had the chance to interview Quinn recently. The two of them basically told me that they are one of the only teams in North America that get to treat it like a job. Nobody else has the financial support to be able to do so right now. Which is a major issue. I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy out of North American Dota. The teams don't have the resources to play Dota, and so the region ends up getting worse and weaker because of it. Crazy actually dropped out. Sorry, go ahead.
Become Undying, sort of. Have crazy.
Yeah, they've become Undying. That one's a little bit interesting. I mean, they've got players from all over the world there. They've got Saberlight, who was ranked 1 out of Europe for a little while, if I'm not mistaken. You might know more about that than me. Unfortunately,
Yes,
haven't had too much time to follow that. There's speaking of Undying, there's some pretty big beef between Zoomers and Undying with Moon. I'm not sure if you heard about that one.
I haven't. No, what's the beef between Undying and Zoomers?
So It's a bit like a bit, in my opinion. There's something about the documents that I think Husky ended up leaking. Moon Meander was giving me a lot of shit into a pub. There's tons of Twitch clips about it. There was
We've already
also
got
a
our first NA beef already. Before the
Mhm.
season's already started, NA is beefing.
Yeah, there was actually a dispute in a match as well between those two teams. I think it was one of the players on Crazy ended up disbanding a game by mistake due to a lobby bug 7 minutes into a game and forced a remake, was the admin final call. Four Zoomers refused to doing a remake in the game. 7 minutes was pretty significant, and they had a Broodmother draft. So
I remember
they
that, yeah.
actually, yeah, they ended up giving up a forfeit there. So that's just more bad blood between those two teams. And
From the way you describe it, you're describing it pretty close to being a 3-horse race here. It's Zoomers, Quincy Crew, and EG. Do you think that's a fair characterization of the region, that it's these 3 teams and then everyone else is there, but not necessarily likely to be on the podium?
I'd say so. Sad Boys, it's hard to say what we're going to expect from them quite yet. When they were playing in BTS Pro Series 4, they had a bit of a weak showing during the group stage. They took 1-1s off of basically everybody. It looked like they hadn't scrimmed at all, but as the tournament progressed, they got stronger and stronger. They actually made it into the lower bracket finals, one game off of getting into the grand finals overall, which honestly ended up surprising me. I think with a little bit more time, with a little bit more structure, the teams could accomplish great things, or this team could accomplish great things, but it's hard to say at this point. I would say that you're right about those 3 teams being the big ones, and despite the huge names on Sad Boys, they are a bit of a dark horse.
Do you think perhaps the format of the DPC could benefit Sad Boys quite a lot? They've got a lot of experience there. They've got PPD, they've got Fear, they have 2 TI winners, and then multiple players who've got very far within a TI. Do you think the ability to prepare and work things through that this will allow will benefit them, or are you less sure about that?
For a team like Sad Boys, I think it benefits them. They have a lot of time to do preparation for their matches. It doesn't need to. They don't need to put all their focus into one thing. My only issue with Sad Boys is a lot of their players are getting older. They have wives, they have kids. Some of the a lot of the players on these other teams, 4 Zoomers especially, I mean, their main focus is Dota. They can grind unreal hours throughout the day playing, and given the nature of the game, there's constant updates, there's constant patches. It's hard to stay at the top. So somebody like Fear, who's got more experience than anybody else, and by all means should be one of the best players in the world, he's going to fall off unless he can keep up putting those kind of hours in like all these other players. And I don't think it's a reflex thing, but getting older, I think getting older, you've got other things in your life, and that stops you from focusing so hard on Dota. And that's one of the weaknesses I see from Sad Boys.
They have quite a young mid in DNM who's only 18 years old. Do you know much about him? How do you expect him to fare?
I know a little bit about him. He's been grinding up for a little while. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the +1 / Demon Slayer story.
Yeah.
He actually ended up ignoring a throw order from his team. There was match fixing being participated in by I think 3 of his players, and they ended up winning, or 2 of his players. They ended up winning a 3 versus 5 match in one of the summit tournaments. His other 3 teammates all banned from future events. I got a hell of a lot of respect for somebody that young, who, your career is in jeopardy if you ignore what your older and more experienced players say. Gatekeeping in North America is real. For him to ignore them and to follow through with tournament integrity is a massive thing. And he ended up he's really proving himself and coming through there. He continued to get better. He's got hundreds of ranks in the last year. I remember talking to a couple people about him back when I was at Jungle Jam. I didn't think too much of him, but my God, has he proved me wrong. Sitting near the top of the leaderboards right now, playing with TI winners. Amazing performance out of him. And again, tons of competitive integrity. I'm expecting great things from him.
The other thing I think that a lot of people will be noticing is Fear returning to the carry role. He's been playing support for quite a number of years now on J Storm, and I think it's just J Storm he's played on, isn't it? Do you think he's still got what it takes to be a carry? Have you seen him play? Have you seen him in pubs at all?
I think he's a little bit weaker than some of his teammates. It falls back onto him not having as much time and him being a little bit older. I think he can fit into basically any role. Anybody who's been playing this game for the amount of time that he has can, give him a month. They'll be able to fit into, I don't know, carry, safe lane, off lane somewhat well. I think given his experience in the game and how long he's been doing things, he's probably more of a strategic mind than he is, an amazing farmer having great reflex to manta dodge things like, say, somebody like Arteezy. That guy is absolutely insane. Not anyone can just play around manta dodging reverse polarity in the middle of a team fight, but that guy manages to do it every single time. Fear, I think he's a very smart carry player, but I think mechanically oriented and reflex, not as much. He did surprise the hell out of me the other day. I was casting one game. He was playing Arc Warden, managed to move back into the Roche pit, the very corner, and drop a magnetic field on himself.
Oh, wow.
Ended up blowing everyone in the enemy team away. They thought they pushed him into the Roche pit to catch him out there, and he ended up completely bodying them. It was an insane move.
Are you an old school Fear fan? Have you been a fan of his for a while? Or
I actually, despite the fact that I've been following North America forever, Fear was one of the big names. I'm a big fan of Owie. I'm a big fan of, I don't know, I'm hit and miss with PPD. That guy makes some big statements. A lot of the time he will end up following through with some of the things he's going to say. I have a lot of respect for him for pulling through out of Europe and qualifying for the ESL LA major. I didn't think he'd be able to pull it off, but he did.
It's a shame
Quinn,
I'm to play that.
Yeah. Were you going to go to that one?
I was going to leave LA immediately before it because I was at the summit, so I would have left the second it started, pretty much, because I did not pay for a hotel room for long enough. But that was a shame. I think he would have. It was a shame he never got to bow out in style. But now he's back, so hopefully it'll be a second wind.
Mm-hmm. Dota players have weird retirements like that. God. Howie 2000, I'm a big fan of. I was going, Quinn, CCNC. I followed him forever. The amount of dedication this guy has to the game, I think it's partially just to prove everybody who doubted him wrong. And at this point, he absolutely has. He sits on the best team in the region as the mid player. He's widely seen as one of the best players in the region. I think right now he's probably considered the best mid, given that Sumail and some of the other players are out of commission.
Quincy, I think for a lot of fans will be a bit of a known quantity. They've been, as you've said, they've dominated the region for quite a long time. I think a lot of people might expect EG to come back and be the top dog. So are you of that feeling that obviously we've not had them almost for a year now? They're coming back. They've got an all-star roster, an addition of a incredible one-time offlaner in Ice. Are you excited about the new EG roster?
I am, but I actually am of the belief that if they had to play the open qualifiers, they would have lost.
Okay.
I think that they could have ended up dropping out of the best of ones. Now, my reason for that is they are in all different regions of the world. I don't think they were at their boot camp just yet. They would have had to been very worried about playing through the open qualifiers. And this happened with several teams in the opens. You'd see a stack of players that are relatively unknown to a lot of the world end up taking down streamer stacks or personal favorites. If you don't have that kind of coordination from having played recently, I think right now we sit at such a high skill cap in all the players in Dota where teamwork and consistency is much more important than individual skill. And that's how EG would have fallen apart. Now they've had a little bit of time to go to their boot camp. I think that they can beat a lot of these teams, but if they had to play in the open qualifiers, I genuinely think that they would have dropped out.
Mm-hmm. But at the position they're now in, this is how do you think of them as a 5-man roster? Because that old EG with Ramses in the position of Ice, that was a really exciting team. I used to really like watching that team. Do you think Ice is a like for like? He's not a like replacement, but in terms of a skill level, do you think it's a good replacement?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the best replacements they could have had, and that's what EG does. They find the biggest talent from all over the world, and they try to mesh them together, somewhat forcefully sometimes, which is a little bit different from how, say, OG or Secret do it, who are also giants in their regions. They do end up making it work with these massive talents of individual skill. I can't say that I'm the biggest fan of how they've been doing things in recent years. Again, I'm a little bit biased. I am an Owie fan, and he got kicked from that team twice. So I don't know. I think you need to mesh together a certain way. You can't just grab all these superstar players like EG have and expect to win a tournament.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so outside of those top three, we've got four more teams filling out the bottom of the bracket. We talked a little bit about Undying being the ex-crazy roster. How about Black and Yellow? That's a Ryora stack. He stood in for EG. I think he looked pretty good at times, slightly inconsistent at other times. Do you think that's an interesting team?
Black and Yellow? Yeah, they have a lot of fans behind them. I'm not sure how much of the games that you caught. Jubai, he hasn't been much of a known quantity just yet. He's a very popular streamer. I'm not quite sure what to expect out of Black and Yellow. Unfortunately, I didn't get to catch that many of their... Sorry, I'm blanking here.
It's okay.
Black and Yellow, they look pretty strong, but they're a team that I'm not that crazy about. I'm not expecting anything too crazy out of them. I'm not expecting them to be too weak. I think they'll probably sit somewhere in the middle of their division, to be honest. I know Roya is an absolutely insane mid player. He impressed the hell out of everybody during Summit 13. He ended up bringing it. Everyone was joking around calling the current era of Dota the Dong Dynasty, which I was a big fan of. But this is another team that I don't think has been together long enough to really feel that strong. The DPC assists with that a little bit in the fact that you only play one match a week and you have a lot of time to do scrimming and prep work. But we'll see how dedicated they are to actually playing the game rather than continuing to stream and whatnot. I think Roya would be an excellent voice to them. But Roya, he has these days where he's the best player in the world, and he has other days where he just completely falls flat in the mid lane, and that worries me a little bit.
Do you think a smaller team like that needs a more consistent offlaner, a consistent mid laner for them to really begin to take games off the big three in this region?
I think they can take games off the biggest team in the region. Like, that's what he does. Sometimes he's the best player in the world, but I also think it's possible for them to lose against a stack that's going to end up towards the bottom there, and that's my biggest concern. I don't see them ending up at the top of the group stage because of that.
The remaining two teams we've not talked about, the A team and 5-man Midas. There are a number of players in there who I think people may recognise the names of, but not know too much about. Are there any players or things anyone should look out for from those two teams?
A lot of the players on 5-man Midas have been part of NA Dota for a very long time. They just have not seen a whole lot of success, unfortunately. They play it casually. That's something I talked about the manager of EG, actually. He said that North America's been bleeding in a lot of talent for a very long time due to the lack of support for the region, and a lot of the players are leaving and never coming back, and he's not sure whether or not it's too late at this point for the DPC to come around. Like, a couple of years ago, this would have been great. A lot of the players that were previously here would have still been here. TC ended up coming back briefly, I believe. Somebody mentioned that to me. I think that was just through an open qualifying match that I didn't end up catching, though.
Are there young players in those two teams, the A team or 5-man Midas, that have been energized into this? Or is this all kind of the old guard, their last ride, as it were?
I think it's the last ride for a lot of these teams. 5-man Midas, they did play in BTS Pro Series 4. They replaced one of their players. I believe it was their position 4. They now have Aikster instead of Sonic, who played on the academy team for Vega Squadron out of North America for a short period of time. A team, that one was a little bit controversial. They actually had Demon on it, and it was originally called Aristotle. He ended up getting banned, though. Yeah. They didn't know that Demon was playing in the tournament originally, as he was listed under a different name on ePulse, apparently.
Do you feel the replacement for him is... Have you been able to watch them as a team without Demon?
Yes, they look a lot stronger without Demon, to be completely honest with you. The guy was... he's very hit and miss as a player. I think that he's a lot of good advice to offer people, but I don't think that his involvement in that team is crucial to their success. I think he's good at noticing talent, but not necessarily the best player. I think he's a bit like Bulba that way.
Fair enough. Let's close up talking about Division 1 by mentioning the meta that we can expect to see. How do you think the NA meta is going to be differing from various other regions? What can people expect when they're tuning into these matches?
In the upper division, I imagine it's a lot what you're going to see in the other regions throughout the world. A lot of people are going to be copying each other. When I got the chance to interview some teams, a lot of these people, they copy both EG and Quincy Crew because they feel like they're able to invest the most time into things. They have the game figured out in the best way. Outside of the upper division, though, in the lower division, you're going to see an interesting ecosystem of Dota where a lot of people have these specialty heroes they play because a lot of them are stacks and not actual full teams where they've got these hero specialties. And a lot of the time it can look kind of questionable and low skill to the untrained eye, I would say. A lot of people said the same thing about Thompson, that he was just a hero spammer a number of years ago when he played with Five Anchors.
Yeah.
I actually worked briefly with one of the coaches for Five Anchors back then, and I was casting some of the games with Drag and Drop as well. And a lot of people, when I told them about Thompson, they told me he's just an Invoker spammer and a Monkey King spammer, and he wouldn't end up amounting to anything. Hilariously.
Are there any particular spammers we should be looking out for in Division 2 then?
God, I wanted to talk about Doze a little bit. AMB, he's been around forever. He's a bit of an emotional player, but he is an absolutely insane Templar assassin. Simply 2 based. They ended up coming together. They have some of the best players for their qualifiers. I'm not sure whether or not there are any specialty heroes. I'm just sort of thinking about them.
I wanted to talk about Simply 2 based a little bit because that to me looks like a team that you'd expect to reach the upper brackets. They've got Z-Freak, who for many years is a lot of people's favourite position 4 player. Monkeys was on 4 Zoomers for a while and was a strong player for their Annihilates, and Boris are both old timers in the scene and are reasonably strong players. Were you disappointed to see them drop down to Division 2?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, you said it for yourself. I mean, Z-Freak, he was on the OGC team who had an amazing run for a little while out of Europe. They had NA for What, which had Steel Borko and whatnot, and they took players from the Cut and players from NA for What, and they put them together for this squad. I think with a little bit more time, they would have been able to make upper division, and I think they could have been one of the teams that would take games off of Quincy Crew, Sad Boys, 4 Zoomers, but unfortunately the announcement did end up happening last minute. These guys are the number 1 team to look out for out of lower division, in my opinion. That and Arkosh, but nobody likes them.
Do you think Arkosh are genuinely a team to watch out for? Could they challenge for promotion?
They could. You could get anything out of Arkosh. They're very entertaining to watch. Don't get me wrong, but I do like watching them fail. They are the villains of North America. Make no mistake.
Okay, so the games for week 1 of Upper League is EG versus 4 Zoomers on the 19th of January. And the 21st of January, we've got Undying versus A-Team, Black and Yellow versus 5 Men Midas. And on the 24th, we've got EG versus Sad Boys and Quincy Crew versus 5 Men Midas. Would EG versus 4 Zoomers be the game that you'd watch out for there?
No, it's going to be the Sad Boys game. This is the kind of thing that everybody was waiting for. They want to see PPD against some of his old teammates and these other giants in North America. I think this is one of the reasons why the region's been dying. They had all these super famous players. We lost Universe. Aui's taking a break just before the DPC started. PPD was elsewhere. Quincy Crew was on break. EG was gone. Now that these teams are back, everyone wants to see who's the strongest after the little hiatus. So I think the viewer base of North America is going to go up, and I think those are going to be the most exciting matches. There's also going to be a little bit of bad blood there between some of these teams. A lot of people don't like PPD because of how outspoken he is. Got a bit of an attitude, which can make for some very fun times, in my opinion. North America is all about some of the bad blood between some of these teams. That is the most entertaining part.
Do you think that EG Sad Boys game is going to be a bit of a bellwether for how we expect the region to go? If you were to see Sad Boys win there, would that tell you a lot about what's going to happen in the upcoming weeks?
It would. I think that would give us the best impression of where EG stands after their hiatus, because right now nobody's quite sure what to expect from them. They know they're going to be a strong team, but Sad Boys is also looking pretty strong, having ended up third in the most recent tournament. I think if EG end up losing to Sad Boys, they're not going to be able to make a major. And it's completely possible.
Yeah, so watch out for that one then. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll leave it there then. Thanks for joining me. Thank you to Neth for taking us through North America. Neth, this is my first time working with him. I think he's a great analyst, and I was really excited to get him on this project. I think, of course, you should follow him on Twitter. It's at Neth Sensei, or Sensei, which is NEPHSENSEI. Of course, that'll be linked in the episode description as well. We, of course, are going to continue moving, and we're going to move over to Southeast Asia, where we're joined by Danog.
Let me just quickly. Should be good.
Great. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through what you see as the top teams of the region.
Ooh, top teams of the region. Well, of course, separating between upper and lower division, it's weird to see, right? Because there's this triangle, I like to call it, where you've got Boom Esports, you've got TNC, and then you've got Fnatic. And I feel like Fnatic overall are probably a tier slightly less than the other two, but they always seem to be able to beat TNC for whatever reason, or most of the time. And then TNC beats Boom, Boom can beat Fnatic most of the time. So it's just a juggle as to who plays who on which day.
There's been quite a few changes in all three of these teams over the past year or so. Certainly, I think a lot of people won't necessarily been following SEA if they're from Europe. Do you think those changes have made all the teams better, or they're teams that have changed for the worse?
I think Fnatic have probably benefited the most from the, I suppose, long duration of uncertainty that we had to go through with, what's happening with the new DPC and all of that, because they tried a few previous iterations. Now DJ's settled in his position 5 role, but there was a couple of tournaments where he went back to 4 and they got rid of jabs to make that happen. But they realized, well, actually, wait, this actually works quite well with DJ captaining from the 5 role, jabs in the 4. They've removed Forev because I feel like he's a bit too farm-centric, and now they've brought in Massaros for Motivate Trust. So I think that's really the roster that's benefited from being able to find their own style and find what fits for them.
How do you expect Fnatic to play? Are they a quick team? Are they an aggressive team? Or are they quite slow? Are they just a good team?
See, the thing with C is that I guess it's kind of similar across all regions, but all of these different teams have a different play style, in my opinion. So, Moon, who most people know Moon, like he's been a staple of the scene for a long time. The only Malaysian player actually in the upper division, which is a bit surprising considering all of the big Malaysian names that have, passed through the history books for Dota. But, he plays things that are a bit slower paced, like the Dragon Knight or the Death Prophet. Never going to be something too flashy. It's just rally the team around me and let's go forward. And I feel like Massaros, with his really aggressive style of position 3, he's going to enable his team to perhaps be a bit quicker, because I feel like that's what this patch is. It's a lot faster than we've ever seen.
And TNC, I think TNC are one of probably the best known teams in the region. I think there was a time when they were very dominant. If we look at this squad now, Febby stepping into position 5 might be a surprise for a lot of people. How do you feel about that?
Well, he was coaching them for a long while, and I think he was doing a really good job. He replaced March, who's now the coach of T1. And with that, it goes all the way back to MDL Changsha. So the first major of the previous DPC, which TNC ended up winning. So they were basically set to go to TI, and now that's completely out the window. But March at the time said, look, I've got the brains, you guys do the execution. Whereas I feel like Febby's got the brains from coaching throughout this entire time, but he's also really good with a lot of his movement and positioning and that sort of stuff. He's very prepared about a lot of stuff. He doesn't call as many things on the fly like March might have. So there's a lot of good content as well on Febby's YouTube channel where he actually goes through things specific to TNC, not just his pubs. So
That's
definitely check that out.
I will check that out. Because what I remember from TNC is the last time I seriously watched them was that major win. Because then it kind of devolved into the regional things, which are harder to watch if you're in the West. But then that period, they were incredibly dominant. And then from what I read, they fell off a little bit. Why do you think that was? And are they kind of in the right end of the curve now?
I think it's the same thing across all regions, actually. Like I've heard Blitz, for example, speak about Liquid in... not Liquid, actually, talk about Viking GG, actually, where, yes, they had this bit of a rise towards the latter end of the pre-DPC season, but he feels like that was because of the other teams just getting burnt out or not caring quite as much. And I feel like, you still do need to perform at a certain level. Salaries are getting paid. You need to be putting forward the right thing for the team and the sponsors and all that sort of stuff. But I think TNC were just like not wanting to burn out. They were just taking a nice slow burn, and if they played really well, they put a lot of focus onto certain tournaments. They won ESL 1 Thailand, beating out some really good teams there. So I think there's not too much to worry about with TNC. They're probably my favorite pick to come out as first in the C division.
Okay, that's a bold prediction, but we'll see if that stands. The team that a lot of people will be interested in is T1. Obviously, as an organisation, they're legends, but their move into Dota has been somewhat slow. There was that Korean attempt, then various other teams that didn't quite work out. What do you think of this most recent T1 roster? Do you think it has the ability to do well?
I think it does. I think they're at the moment second on my power rankings. So it's essentially the old Geek Fam roster, but they've got Jackie now, who's come over from Motivate Trust, who it's a bit of a fall from grace, right? Like Masaros got poached to play offlane for Fnatic. Jackie got poached to play now for T1. And then you've got Cuckoo, Carl, Whitemon, or Zephyr, there we go, playing from the old Geek Fam. And they're a really good roster. They're really solid. They're really consistent. And the thing that differentiates them from a lot of these other C teams is they've got a set strategy and they listen to one person. Even if it might be an absolutely stupid call, they commit to it. And, even if it's a dumb call, 30% of the time it works. And so I feel like they get the edge ahead of a lot of other teams because of that.
Are they one of the more exciting teams to watch, you'd say? Because I remember watching that old Geek Fam roster and they were great.
Exactly. I think Zephyr is probably one of the best positioned fours in the world. I think Cuckoo has his own very unique style of drafting for himself as well as the team. Like he'll play a lot of Night Stalker paired together with an IO and actually put the Night Stalker in his lane. So he really is a solid third core for all of that. And then Jackie, I'm kind of interested to see how he goes with this new patch, because Spectre isn't anywhere near as strong, and that was very much his staple. He played a decent Sven. Terrorblade's still pretty good. He's up there. But the Rickies and these style of heroes, I think it's a little bit out of his wheelhouse, but he's a really skilled individual player, and so I think it'll be pretty damn easy for him to pick it up.
I was going to ask about that, actually, the patch and how it's going to affect these teams. A lot of them won't have played as comprehensively on this patch as they will on the last. They're coming almost into this tournament quite cold. Do you think that's going to affect other teams more than particular? How do you feel they're going to be preparing for this?
I feel like with some of C teams, they're kind of predictable. Like in terms of, okay, so-and-so, I'm just going to use, let's say, Neon Esports, for example. Their position 5 always plays some sort of sustaining 5, whether it be like a Witch Doctor, an IO, a Phoenix, that sort of stuff. So you know exactly what's going to come from that. And I feel like when a huge patch like this comes out, you can't still have that. Like you can't still have that one play style that you just go to. So you need to change things up a little bit. And from what I've been hearing, Neon scrims have been going really well. So hopefully that's the case for them.
Have you heard a lot about the scrimming data? There are teams that are performing a lot better than others, or
yes. I don't want to reveal too much, but yeah, there definitely are teams like Neon have been playing really well. I think T1 have got some pretty good results too. So, and I think teams like Vice and Execration, the ones that just came through in the last 2 positions into this upper division, have received a lot of benefit from being able to play against a lot of these other teams. They might not be doing too well, but similar to the old Motivate Trust when they had a good showing at ESL 1 Thailand, it just meant that the likes of, TNC, it was Geek Fam at the time, Fnatic, they just asked to scrim against them and they were just able to build up more and more. So I think they're going to probably be the most improved, but they're still the target for mine for the 2 that might be relegated, the 2 Filipino teams.
Do you expect Neon Esports and 496 Gaming to also struggle? That kind of bottom 4 of the bracket, are they clearly worse than the top 4, or is it quite close?
I think there's a top 5 in C.
Okay.
I think Neon is part of that 5. I think 496 is not a bad team by any stretch of the imagination. They've just added Hustler as well, the sole Mongolian player, I think, in the upper division. And he's a good one as well. So I think they're probably not going to get relegated, but I think it would be very hard for them to secure one of those top 3 spots.
Okay. SEA as a region is one of the only 2 regions that over this coronavirus period hasn't been combined with another region. So Europe being combined with CIS and NA and SA combining. Only China and SEA are kind of stood by themselves. Do you think that's had an effect on the meta of the region and how its personality has evolved over the past months?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like for every single tournament, in EU and CIS, that was the case, right? There have been a couple of tournaments here and there where they've combined, but it felt like SEA was had the edge for most of those, but that was mostly because the top of the line Chinese teams weren't actually at these tournaments, and that just has to do with all the firewall and that sort of stuff. Filipino teams actually prefer playing on Chinese servers because it's closer to them, but I don't know. I feel like yes, you've still got your teams that go for your classic C Dota style that the likes of MVP Phoenix used to play, just run at you Dota. They still exist, and I'd say probably the Filipino teams are the ones that lead in more towards that sort of mantra. But that's not to say you don't have some aggressive individual playmakers. Yopaj on Neon Esports is, in my opinion, one of the most exciting mid players in the world. He plays all sorts of cool mid heroes. He's like the C's example to Thompson is what I call him.
Do you think that regions matured quite a lot? Because I always remember the old days of watching SEA. They'd feel like an immature region. They were very exciting. They were very aggressive. They played in a way that felt unrefined. Do you think over the time of this past year, especially, that's changed?
I think for some teams, yes, and for some teams that haven't made that sort of change to realize, look, this is at the end of the day, it's fun. It's a video game, but you need to actually put in the right type of preparation for it in terms of, strats and attitudes and drafts. The ones that haven't, we're seeing a few of them in the lower division. I'm not going to name names, but I know of certain teams that literally they go into a draft, they sit down and they say, okay, what do we feel like playing today? Not what is going to work against this team, or, they're really good at these heroes, or, we've got 5 strats prepared and this is our plan D. It's just purely based on feeling. And as much as that can make for a fun environment, I just don't think that Dota can allow that anymore to happen, just pure emotion.
Something that's unusual about the DPC leagues, and it kind of ties into what you were just saying there, is the amount of time that teams have to prepare for each match. There are teams that will have almost a week to prepare between different matches. Are there teams you think that will particularly benefit, that have a very strong support structure or coaching element to their team?
Yeah. So I think with the coaching, we've mentioned before, March, obviously he's over at T1. That's all he needs to focus on. He doesn't need to rely on being the captain, both for in-game stuff as well as practicing, as well as making sure his team is happy and all these sorts of stuff. Clairvoyance, he's still coaching Boom after having coached the likes of, Alliance, EG, NIP, Cloud9. He's definitely got a lot of experience there. So I think, those ones that have a bit more of a support structure behind them, they're really going to benefit, because at the end of the day, it's a lot of Dota to watch, but you're not playing much. You're playing like 1 BO3, occasionally 2 per week.
Are there particular rivalries that you'd like to bring out from this region? Are there any kind of hot, like little bits of drama going on, or stuff that makes any matches particularly spicy?
I think within C, honestly, even though in pubs people might think it's very different in terms of the vitriol that gets thrown around, but everyone seems to get along pretty damn well. I think if there's any spice that might be there, it's probably not from team to team. That's more of a healthy rivalry. It's more like player to player. You're like, oh, you kicked me, we need to put you in the bin. Kind of like, the old no tail and fly sort of stuff coming from the European region. So not that they have a bad relationship, but, Jackie and Massaros, old Motivate Trust teammates. So I think when T1 and Fnatic go up against each other, that's going to be pretty good. T1 and TNC, they kicked March to be able to bring in Febby. So there's that Korean aspect there, but also, you removed me from my spot. I was sitting pretty. So, yeah, I think there's a little bit to play with there.
It feels like a lot of the SEA teams, so many players move across teams very regularly as opposed to other regions, because it's both insular and also just quite fast moving. Does it feel that a lot of these teams are much closer than a European team would be to each other? Just in terms of personality, standard and personality, and kind of play style?
I think with C, it's very, for a lot of these people in C, obviously the overall standard of living in terms of the money that they get is a bit lower perhaps than a lot of these other European regions. So for a lot of them, Dota's all they got. So you're just playing a whole lot more. You're getting these great individual skill, and it's up to you with what you do with it. So I think personality-wise, I think people are a lot closer than a lot of the other regions. I think, like you mentioned before, the standard is also quite close, and I think that actually extends into the lower division as well. I think C is probably the #1 lower division standard across the world, at least from what I've seen, and I'd put Europe at actually 4th. I think there's a big drop-off between the top 8 in Europe, even the top 7, and everything else beyond that.
That's a perfect segue into what I want to talk about next, which is the lower division. Are there particular teams there that jump out to you as likely to be dominant and very likely to get promoted next season?
I'd say there's probably a top 3, let's say. So Hoyo is one that's kind of like the rejects that have come from a lot of these other teams. So, you've got Fearless and Boombell, who were on the old Motivate Trust. You've got Jokam, who was on T1 alongside, I believe it's Miracle, that's also playing on that team. And Galaxy Racer, they're a full Malaysian team. A lot more Malaysians, actually, in the lower division. So I think they're right up there as well. And Omega Esports, they're the old Adroit roster. So I think, well, minus Natsumi. Natsumi's now playing for Neon. But I think they're probably the top 3 to really look out for.
There are a few teams there which are fully consistent of players who have no Liquipedia pages. So there might be teams that a lot of viewers here, even people who watch a lot of SEA data, are entirely unaware of. That's Army Geniuses and Lil Gun. Are they players that you're aware of, that anyone you'd like to highlight at all?
With Army Geniuses and Lil Gun, I think rather than individual skill, that we're looking for individual players across the region. I think it's just really good to have these full national lineups. So if you're a fan of Indonesian Dota, then get behind Army Geniuses. If you're a fan of Mongolian Dota, get behind Lil Gun. With that being said, the thing that I like about Army Geniuses, even though they're probably 8th at the moment on my power rankings, is they're not afraid to go cross-region to try and play in different styles of tournaments and experience different kinds of Dota. So they've played in a number of Chinese tournaments, for example. They even came and played in some online Oceania tournaments against some Australians and Kiwis, just to see, how are things different across the regions. With that being said, though, in the past 3 or so months, the win rate's probably about 33%. So they're still looking a little rough for me. I think Little Gun have a chance, though. They were pretty impressive to me. They won I think everyone else that they played against except for the Prime. Ironic, because the Prime didn't make it through. But I still have them ahead of Signal Ultra. I think Signal, while they've been together a long time and they've got a pretty stable roster, I don't see it with them. They don't have that spark that some of these other teams have that are going to be able to propel them to potentially reaching the upper division and hopefully avoiding, for their sake, the lower division.
It's interesting to hear. Are there young players in either region, in either division, that you'd like to highlight who you think are exciting new faces in the scene?
The ones that perhaps people might not have had too much experience with?
Yeah,
I would say, I'm just going to give a quick shout out to Ghost and Destrus. They actually played on Team Oracle, which was the closest thing that Australia actually had to a team. It was QO's old team, and there were a couple of Aussies on there with him. Yeah. So very individual skilled players. Destrus was as high as rank 3 in Southeast Asia. I think he's around 30 or so now. I think Fearless as well, from Team Hoyo. He's a very skilled mid player. He's from part of that old Motivate Trust lineup. So shout outs to him. And upper division, where I'm sure a lot more people are going to be watching it, but make sure you're watching lower division, because I'm casting it with Cyclops and Ares. But Yopaj again from Neon, I think, is going to be really exciting for a lot of people to experience that haven't before. In the mid lane, Skem, who was previously playing position 1 for all this time, is now a position 4 player. So he's changed things up a little bit. So I think, definitely tune in to watch how that turns out. And I'm keen to see how Drew actually, he used to play on Reality Rift. He's an Indonesian player, and now he's the carry for Boom Esports. So Dream Marcel is out, Drew is in.
It's exciting. Okay, we'll keep an eye on them then. So the matches for next week, we could go through those quickly. For the upper division this week, we have Fnatic versus T1 on the 20th of January, Boom versus Neon. On the 21st, we've got 496 versus Vice, and on the 23rd, we have TNC versus Extinction and Neon versus 496. Would Fnatic versus T1 be very much your pick for the week?
I think just that first day, like tune in for that first day, and hopefully, like myself, you get hooked on Sea Dota because those are two fantastic matches. It should be down to the wire for both of them.
Are there any matches in that week that you'd describe as sort of a bellwether for what's going to happen for the whole tournament that you'd really look to understand the meta or the flow of the game?
I don't know, because with Neon, they kind of don't care what the meta is. They make their own meta. Back 4 months ago, they were playing position 5 Faceless Void, position 1 Chen, and making it work and winning. So, like, anything's possible with them. Fnatic, I think, I don't know. It's so weird to say, right? They've got all their individual playstyles. Converging around Moon for these death ball push with high cooldowns heroes. That's the way that Fnatic play, and with aggressive styles from Masros, that's how they make it happen. T1 with Cuckoo, he says again, screw the meta, I'll do whatever the hell I want. Boom, they're just a lot more stable, but Hyde and Kezku, they play these unorthodox position 4 heroes. He plays 5 Tusk and Clockwork and Pangolier, and you see 4 Darkseer and Doom and even Chen from the 4 role. So just things that are a little bit different, and it's worked for them across the months that we've had during this this COVID situation. So I don't know. It's so hard to say whether there's going to be a barometer for how the season's going to go just based off of this first week, because maybe for how those individual teams will play, but definitely not for the region as a whole. And that's what I think makes it so exciting.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll be sure to tune in then. So thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next week. Wonderful. That was great. Thanks so much for that. Thank you to Danog for taking us through Southeast Asia. Again, it's my first time working with him. I've always really enjoyed watching him, especially at ESL 1 Thailand, I think. I thought he was great there, and that's what led me to bring him on to this. Of course, like everyone, you should follow him on Twitter. I will just very quickly look up his Twitter handle because I've forgotten. It's just Danog. He's got the ultimate Twitter handle at Danog, DANOG. And you should follow him there for more great stuff. We're going to be rocketing straight on to my fellow British analyst, Mo Farah, who is covering CIS. Through the region as you see it, and now we know all the teams.
So, I find CIS, obviously every region's different in the sense that how balanced the upper division is, right? So the way I see it for CIS is that it's almost a little bit top heavy with VP, because VP's biggest and toughest opponents have been from EU as well. So now they're separated from each other. Obviously, a lot of the top EU teams were there to like battle VP for those like first positions and things aren't there anymore. So we have this like VP at the top, and then kind of like closely followed by the other 3 invited teams were obviously Na'Vi, Spirit, and Live to Win, who I think nobody could argue with those invites to the upper division. I think they were well deserved. And then it's kind of like all the teams that came through the decider tournament, I feel like are slightly underneath the top 4. So for me, it almost kind of like splits it into 2 separate like groups almost of where I feel like they should be finishing within the whole group stage. I mean, for me, VP should be big favorites for this. Like we were saying, without the top EU teams, I feel like there's no other CIS team that are quite at the place they were. But on a new patch, we haven't seen the top teams play officials yet, so it's really difficult to know. For me personally, maybe we see one of these teams that haven't played any officials yet suddenly, come up with something crazy because it's a new patch and they start setting the meta for themselves. So I'm interested to see, but yeah, for me, the top 4 should be the 4 invited teams to the upper division pretty easily, almost.
A lot of people, I think, won't necessarily be familiar with the Virtus Pro lineup. I think it looks quite a lot different to, obviously, the most famous Virtus Pro lineup, and also the Virtus Pro lineups we've had quite recently. They've got two quite new players in Nightfall and Kingslayer. Do you still think with those 18-year-olds they're as dominant a force? Do you think that there might be some sort of bedding in process?
I mean, because okay, so obviously with VP, it's the old VP Prodigy. I think everybody kind of has caught on to that by now. It's almost it was this like really difficult phase of learning to call them the normal VP. But Nightfall and Kingslayer are actually the old Epileptic Kid and Ilias. So they've just changed their names.
Oh, they have.
So
okay.
So it's the same guys that they were before, but they've just decided to change their names for some reason. I mean, I feel like rebranding in Dota is a really difficult thing to do, but just get it done now. It's fine. They're still young in their career. For me, VP though, they are still a young team by age, like you're saying, and I feel no matter how well they've done so far, I still feel like they have so much room to grow with how young they are within the scene. So it's pretty scary to think if you're another team within CIS, if VP can keep it together within their team and keep this level of consistency up that they have so far, if they keep growing, how much room have they got to grow? And all the other teams in Europe must be thinking, if we ever play a mixed Euro CIS tournament again, these guys could really go all out if they carry on playing at the high level they are right now.
And VP, obviously, they took so much time to get their roster right across last season and the season when Solo stepped away. It was a long period, I think, when the Solo was trying to put together teams and VP Prodigy seemed better and then current VP seemed better. Do you think that that's the organisation? There's some sort of power behind the organisation that's allowed them to eventually get together a team? Because we've seen a lot of CIS teams in the past decline from really highs to lows. What do you think it is about the VPs that's allowed them to return to this high level?
I think the organisation have realised that they had this really strong roster before, and historically they've always been really strong. Apart from at TI, where they tend to seem to really struggle, but across all the majors and everything, VP have always been really good. But they can't. I don't think they ever wanted to settle, in a sense, right? They always wanted to be looking to improve the organisation. It seems to me. So they had this idea that they created VP Prodigy before to allow them to eventually say, we are helping these guys, and we want to keep our main team on their toes almost. And it got to that point where VP Prodigy were really starting to take over, and it puts the organization in a really difficult position where they have to think, okay, well, do we want to trust these old guard that we've had for such a long time, or do we want to put our faith in somebody new and see about where they can go? And it's fantastic to see, for me personally, that they've decided to go with the roster that they currently have, because like I said, I think they've got so much potential. And it's weird to say they've got so much potential when they're already winning tournaments and like beating the top teams. So for me personally, I think VP, the organization, have done a really good job with how they've approached the last few years almost. And it's going to be interesting to see, historically, the problem with CS has been that rosters tend to fall apart quite quickly and things. And there's that lack of stability almost in the region. It's got better recently, but if the VP organization can keep these guys together and keep them, even if you lose games, you lose games, right? It happens to the best of us, but it's about making sure you have the right mentality to learn from those games and keep building as a unit, because I would be scared if I was another team in CIS right now I could see it like a long reign of dominance coming for VP.
And how do you expect VP to play? What do you think their signature style is for those who are unfamiliar with the team?
I mean, before, VP used to play really quick, really high tempo. I remember speaking to Celery before from Viking, and he was saying that whenever they had to play against OG and VP, he would have to completely change their game plan almost because of how quick the teams used to play, and he used to have to be able to try and match that tempo. And if they didn't, they would just get run over. I think it's really difficult now. There's a new patch though to say how these top teams are going to play, because they've been playing this really quick tempo, high-paced game for such a long time. Maybe they feel like now is a better patch for them to slow down potentially, or pick different heroes that allow them to play a different way. I think the first few weeks are going to be really, 2 or 3 weeks, going to be really telling of how kind of the meta is going to be set in the region. Because Na'Vi, for instance, have loved mid Doom and everything for a long time, but I could see teams kind of where there's been this big downtime for them, especially the teams that haven't played any officials yet. I could see them like creating something new, and they've had the time to.
You mentioned that they're obviously now stepping away from playing with Europe. They're full-time for, I think, for the past 6 months. CIS and Europe have almost been one region. Do you think that shift in between just playing against CIS teams is going to have a big effect on the meta? Because you mentioned that Vikings said that they had to play so quick against VP, but that's almost feels to me like a CIS thing rather than specifically a VP thing. Do you think that's going to change things?
I think for CIS, I think they will be the ones that suffer. But obviously, they'll be scrimming against EU all the time and things anyway, so they'll still learn from each other. But I think in officials, what we used to see is kind of almost two kind of like separate metas between Europe and CIS before like this whole coming together happened again. And I think, yes, CIS have always played quick, but I feel like VP play it on a different level because they're so much cleaner with their plays than a lot of the other teams in the region have been. I can see teams playing fast again or like attempting to, but then if they feel like it's not going well, potentially like Team Spirit, for example, as well, have been, which is the ex-Yellow Submarine, by the way. I should probably point that out just in case people don't know. They've been on this amazing run the last few months where they like blitz through Epic League and everything, and then they beat Viking 3-0 in a BTS Pro Series and all sorts. I think they've looked really good when they've played quick as well. So I worry for the teams that came through the Decider tournament in CIS about whether they'll be able to play the same way they did in the Decider tournament against the teams that qualified to the upper division automatically. Because I feel like the skill level, like the skill jump from the bottom 4 teams in the group to the top 4 is absolutely massive for me personally. So I'm excited to see it though.
Do you think that EU CIS crossover changed things? Do you think it made CIS teams see the game differently or see their approach to the game differently? Because it feels like scrimming across the regions now is more common. I don't think that was such a common thing maybe 2 years ago.
I think scrimming is one thing, but playing officials against Europe all the time has really... I feel like it would have benefited Europe as well, but the CIS teams especially, I think, will have learned a lot from playing like the Secrets, the Liquids, the OGs, all these other top European teams. Because scrimming against them is great, but I feel like you take the most away from officials still, is what I'd imagine. So personally, CIS, it's always been in a good spot. And especially, but like the top teams in both regions, Europe's always been like slightly favored, you would say, apart from VP, obviously. So it's nice to see like Yellow Submarine, now Team Spirit, like coming through and potentially pushing on. Like Na'Vi have been doing really well recently as well. We also obviously have the new like Live to Win stack, which is I say new, it's been around like 3 months, 2-3 months or something now, which is the Seneca stack. And yeah, I think that they will have benefited a lot from having these like top opponents in Europe.
Let's go into that Live to Win stack in a little bit more detail, because Seneko is obviously a player that for a lot of people have been very excited about him. He was in NIP and then left NIP, and then NIP kind of almost left the top of the scene with him.
Yeah.
He's built great teams. He was on Na'Vi for such a long time. Do you think this is his real time to shine? What do you think's maybe holding him back from building a tier 1 team?
I feel like they had a good attempt at a tier 1 team going with Ninjas. It was... we know how that's turned out for Ninjas as well, Nip, ever since they kicked him. The team's just disbanded since. And it wasn't a surprise to me because it felt like Seneca was the blood of that team, almost like the strong base. And it's nice to see that he's managed to put together a team so quickly that has the capability to compete at the top level again. And that's, full credit to him. I think FN's been around for a really long time. Obviously, we've seen him playing and standing in for VP and things for a long time. I think Dream's really good as well. Immersion's obviously been playing for Na'Vi for quite a while, and he's been, really solid. I think that stack from Live to Win is in a really weird position where they're strong, but I think they need to try and find another level to be able to compete with like VP Na'Vi Spirit, for example. Because the way I see the group, I talked about it split into 4 and 4 before. I feel like you have like VP Na'Vi Spirit at the top, and then like Live to Win, and the other team that I think has potential to possibly push on is like No Techies, which is the new solo Zayak stack. And then it's like, can Live to Win and No Techies really reach another level almost? Because VP Na'Vi Spirit, they have these like organizations that they can base around, get help from and everything, get that support they need. Whereas I know Seneca's quite like he there was like rumors about him leaving NIP because he didn't want to work particularly like within an organization and stuff or whatever. I don't know how true that is, but like he believes in his ideas effectively, right? And so, very strong-headed guy. I feel like you need that level of confidence though almost to be able to reach the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So I have full faith in them that they can, especially with the players that they have. They've been around the scene for such a long time. It's just about, you only play these other top teams once every few months now. You play your series against them, and then you're not going to play them again for quite a while. If you have a good day, the other team have a bad day, who knows what can happen.
Mm-hmm. And Na'Vi as well. Na'Vi are probably, I'd say, the best supported team in the region. They're a huge brand. This is quite a new Na'Vi stack for a lot of people. Obviously, it's the Flight to Moon boys from before. Are they a team that you think can live up to the Na'Vi name, or is there a way to go for them?
I think they've been playing really well for a long time. I mean, these guys have played together for quite a while. It's the 4 Ukrainian guys plus Russia, which Roger, sorry, not Russia, which is nice to see. I think General especially seems to be like the big playmaker for me in that team from the 3 role, where if he has a good game, I feel like sometimes he just pops off and he's like this massive creativity and space maker within the team. But I feel like Always Wanna Fly has been drafting really well for quite a while with that lineup. And he's looked really solid, and they have really good ideas. They have like their core of heroes that they seem to enjoy a lot. We've talked about the mid Doom already. Like General on is like his Bat Rider and Clock and things has looked really good. But I always feel like Na'Vi, have they got that within them to be able to compete with VP? Because like I've talked about, I feel like VP have that ability to push on even further. I don't know whether Na'Vi have like almost kind of like got this ceiling that they won't be able to push through. The same way that VP have like so much room to grow. So that's my worry for them, that if things start to go badly, that they might struggle potentially. But I think they will definitely be. I'd be surprised if they don't finish within the top 3, because they've been around together for a long time. They've played together for a long time. Really solid.
They're a very experienced team. They're probably the most experienced team in the region, arguably, in terms of every player's over 20, 23 roughly. Do you think that helps? Does that in this sort of environment of a league where you have to go from things to thing, or is it perhaps that they are so experienced and been around and not had that top tier success that might hold them back?
I mean, you could say that across like all sports, though, right? Like, how much does experience obviously matters, because especially when it comes to like the mental side of the game, potentially they lose a series that they shouldn't have lost. Maybe they make a couple of mistakes. I feel like if you have that level of experience within the team, you can reset quicker. Maybe, it doesn't affect you as much because you've had that, previous loss before that you've been able to reset from, and that you can perform better as a squad. But I feel like the flair almost is like we said, because they're not playing very often, right? These official games in the DPC, they're not going to be playing like every single day as we see from other tournaments. I almost feel like if you have more time to prepare and everything, that might be something that comes into their favor almost, because like we say, they've been around for such a long time. They played so many different games together. They understand how to prepare for each like situation better, potentially.
And they have an org behind them who can help them with that preparation. Yes. Whereas if it's Live to Win, it's just Seneko in his bedroom dreaming up.
Honestly, Seneko would probably prefer that. That's probably just what I imagine. That's what he's like in my head. But I don't know who's working for the Na'Vi organization, who's going to help them. But it would be surprising to me if, exactly like you said, that they don't, with all the prep time and everything and all the people they have in the organization to help them, they don't come into every series with such like a really good idea of how they should be playing. Because like we said, with Celery, it's talking about, when he plays Viking, OG and VP, for example, they come in with a different strategy. I feel like when it's just CIS, and loads of these players have played with each other before, they'll all have a good understanding, they play pubs together all the time, how they should come into, playing each series.
And just to kind of close up on Division 1, the bottom half of that bracket, you mentioned a couple of them in passing. We haven't really talked much about Team Empire or Extremium. Do you think they're teams that have potential to surprise, or do you see them mainly as being a touch on the mediocre side?
So, No Techies is obviously the one for me, I think, that will be potentially really interesting with the Solo Zayat stack. But then you have Empire is really interesting because you have Gwynblade and Petashara playing for Empire, who are like these two guys that have come in recently. And I watched them in the Decider tournament, and they actually played much better than I thought they would.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gwynblade especially, I was watching his mid lane, and he seemed to be performing really well. Like, again, much better than I thought he would. So I think of the other three teams that are left in Empire, Extremum, and No Pangolier, I think Empire are probably, for me, almost like a one to watch, just because they have like almost like newer players within the scene that we haven't seen as much of. But again, can they fight with like VP, Na'Vi, Spirit? Not so sure about that because again, they don't have the level of experience that the other teams do. But almost for Empire, I think if they don't get relegated within the first season, I almost feel like this is a season that they can build on massively.
Yeah, foundational.
Exactly. It's like going into season 2, they can say, we have a much better idea of how we want to play as a unit now. We've played together for a much longer time, and it'll be interesting to see if they can do that.
Mm-hmm. And just to touch briefly on the lower bracket, the Division 2, are there teams in there? We don't have to go in all of them in particular detail, but are there teams in there that really stand out to you? A lot of people might have been surprised that Gambit didn't make it to the top region, for example.
Yeah, I mean, the big two for me are Hellraisers and Gambit that didn't make the upper division. I mean, they really didn't play that well in the Decider tournament, which is a big shock to me. Like teams like Empire were going through and everything in the upper bracket, and we're seeing teams like Hellraisers and Gambit just fall down completely. And these are guys that have been around the scene for quite a long time, like Resolution's playing for Hellraisers, for example, like Lil, Vanscore, Kuman, and then even on Gambit, we've got like Blizzy, like ex-Na'Vi players and everything. They've been around for a while now, and they've looked really good. So for them, I almost feel like Division 2 at the top is still really close as well. Obviously, we had Bait going down. There was that big question about whether they should have been invited to the Decider tournament in the first place. But I feel like Division 2 should be really close as well. Obviously, the teams that came through the open qualifiers, there might be a couple of them that fall down quite hard potentially, because like we say, they haven't got the same level of experience that the other teams do. But the guys that have been around for a long time, they'll be really looking to push on to Division 1 this time, because if they don't, I could see some more roster changes happening.
There's two teams in the lower division, Imperial Pro Gaming and Team Generation, whose players don't have Wikipedia pages. Are they players that you know at all, or am I stabbing in the dark?
I don't. I think I've seen Force Major before potentially, but it might be just a similar name to somebody else. But yeah, these guys, I don't really have any idea who they are. But for me, that almost makes it more exciting, because when you watch the lower division games, if one of the players takes you by surprise, maybe the team takes everybody by surprise, it's almost like a fairy tale, right? So it would be nice to see if now they have that stable income coming in through the DPC, if they can really look to, try and be, have that more stability within the team, be able to build up their ideas together as a unit. But I can see them really struggling against like the veterans of the scene.
Mm-hmm. Just to close up, let's have a look at the schedule for next week. We've got in upper division 1, we've got Extremium versus Team Spirit on January the 21st. January 22nd, No Pangolier versus Na'Vi and No Techies versus Live to Win. And January 24th, we've got No Techies versus Na'Vi and VP versus Empire. Would VP versus Empire be your pick of games for the week?
Difficult. I feel like No Techies versus Live to Win is probably the one that I would look to, in the sense that I think they're probably the closest match. Because No Tech is obviously the solo Zayat stack that's been formed. And at Live to Win, for me personally, I would say they're both like the 4th, 5th teams in the group. So if one of them can start to gain momentum, I could see them, starting to feeling pretty confident going into the later games. I will say, I don't know when it is in the group stage. The one I'm really looking forward to is Team Spirit versus No Techies, because obviously when they were Yellow Submarine at the time, there was that big controversy in the Epic League about when they didn't qualify for Division 1 on Yellow Submarine because they had to play against the Sumail, No One, Zayat solo stack, and they lost. And they eventually beat them in the playoffs afterwards in Epic League again. But I feel like that rivalry might still be there. So it'll be good to see whether there's kind of like more focus, if there's any drama at all, because who doesn't love a bit of drama within the Dota scene?
Is there something of a bellwether match in any of those that will help you kind of get a handle on where the region's going to be? Are they all equally important for that, or is there one which you're going to kind of watch with a particular eye to see this is what's going to happen in Division 1?
I think the first week is always the most important. It doesn't matter who you play. I think if you can, like we said, the top teams haven't played yet, so I feel like the top teams always set the meta. If the first week goes badly for you, I feel like you're already playing on the back foot, right? You might start to doubt yourself almost, which is where that experience comes through from a lot of the players within the CIS scene. Can they stabilize themselves again? But it'll be interesting to see if the top teams do something different, how quickly the other teams will adjust within the division. Say for like VP, for example, they decide to slow the game down a little bit. They start picking these like really hard carries, like 4 Protect 1s. Does the rest of the scene follow suit, or do they trust within their own ideas still? And I think adjusting is where it comes down to a lot of the time after a new patch has dropped. And yeah, interested to see how the region develops as a whole across the division.
Okay, great. I think that's a good note to end on. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you to Mo Farah for taking us through CIS. Mo Farah can, of course, be found on Twitter. Very easy to confuse him with the British athlete, so make sure not to do that. He is Mo Farah Dota, at Mo Farah Dota. Follow him there. We, however, are going to be moving straight on to our final analyst for the day. It is Bowie, who is standing in for 1437, thankfully, this week, because 1437 had a scheduling conflict. So Bowie, I think, is the best replacement that's possible to get, and he's going to be taking us through South America.
Right.
So, just to start, talk me through what you see as the top teams in South America.
All right, so I feel like the top teams right now, if I had to pick 3, it would probably be Beast Coast, SG Esports, and Thunder Predator. I think they are probably they're gonna be the 3. They're probably going to be top 3. I feel like Beast Coast is kind of an unknown because they were definitely the best team like 6 months ago, but they didn't play as much as maybe some of these other teams. I'm not sure how they are, like their form right now, but if they do, if they are training a lot, I think they definitely have the potential to be top 1.
This Beast Coast roster will be very familiar to a lot of people watching, so obviously we're at the International where they performed incredibly well and they've done very well at a lot of majors. Do you think they've not maintained that level of performance up until now?
I mean, it's kind of hard to say. It's not even about them maintaining their performance, but everyone else actually playing more, because in South America there were not that many tournaments. So Beast Coast, I'm pretty sure 2 players took like 4 months away from the team, and they were playing with standings. But even when they were playing, you could see that they were not as serious, for sure. And I mean, overall, there were a lot of teams that kept playing. Not all of them, but most did. So I do feel like there's going to be a learning curve again for Beast Coast, but they're really good. So I wouldn't be surprised that they maybe start off a little shaky, but get back in their feet in like 2-3 weeks.
Can we expect them to play in a similar way as we were used to? Are they still that aggressive, very fast team that they used to be, or have they calmed down a little bit?
I would say they're pretty much the same team, and Wraith King is super meta right now, so that definitely plays in their advantage. It was that hero that allowed them to get top 8 at TI. So yeah, I do feel like they really didn't change that much. They're probably the same team in that regard.
Okay, let's go into Thunder Predator, who I think those people who have been watching the NASA combined league, they'll be more aware of them because they were one of the top SA teams in there. Who are the key people in that team that people should be aware of?
So I mean, they pretty much have. I would say they're better. I guess their most known players are Leo Style. He's been playing for a long time. He played for Brazilian Stacks as well. Frank and Moose are definitely like my 3 preferred players in that roster. They are respectively playing 2, 3, and 4 in that roster. And I mean, I feel like I really have to highlight Frank because he is probably the highest MMR non-American player playing the SA DPC. He's ranked 6. He's also kind of underrated. I don't feel like people actually talk about him that much, but he's super skilled. Probably
Mhm.
probably the best raw skilled player in South America right now. So I definitely feel like this guy is off the radar of some people, and he will surprise a lot.
Are they a team that's therefore a bit led by the free position, or are they quite balanced? Can we expect a lot of carry play there as well?
I feel like they are balanced overall. Like everyone is super high MMR. I actually did a ranking of the South America MMR, and they are the highest MMR among every other team, even Beast
Mhm.
Coast. So they're just like really really high skilled in general. But they're position 3 right now. I just love watching Frank play. He's incredibly skilled.
Are there any particular heroes that we can look out for coming from them, or do we not know with the new patch?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard. They didn't play that much because they were actually invited directly, right?
Mhm.
So I didn't really see that much from them. And unfortunately, Frank, I'm not sure if you know what Dota 2 Pro Tracker is.
Yeah.
It's a website that tracks high MMR players, and Frank is not there, so it's really hard for me to find his replays.
That's a shame.
But it's a shame. But I mean, Leo style, he's a pretty classic mid player. You know, he plays the Quops, the Pucks, and those heroes, especially Puck, are really strong right now. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of Puck coming from them, a lot of high tempo heroes, because that's kind of how South America has been working for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Is that going to be across the region? Do you think? Let's talk a little bit about the South American meta. What can we expect to see now that it's unchained from North America?
So yeah, there's kind of like a meme, at least in Brazil, where it's like people used to say that Peruvian players they're pub players because they just play much more pubs than the Brazilian players. So overall, their meta is much more centered around like high tempo. They don't think about farming that much. So if I had to be like, it's probably not the greatest generalization, but it's definitely true to some degree. The Peruvian players, they're higher tempo. They actually farm much less, whereas the Brazilian players, they try to be, I guess, like more tactical in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like that plays against them a lot of times because they just want to wait their timing sometimes too much, and they forget to press their advantage. They forget to play like pubs sometimes. If I had to be more specific, so Brazilian players not that high tempo. They like farming a little bit more. They're afraid to get Roshan. There's a meme that's called the Brazilian Roche, where like in general, like Brazilian players for too long, they just forced Roche too much, and they pretty much lost games trying to get a Roche that wasn't ideal, and they are doubling down on the opposite side of that, where like they only get Roche if they get 4 kills, and then they're sure that Roche is gonna be free. But yeah, overall, I would say Peruvian players much more higher tempo, a lot more aggression. Sometimes they do play for Protect 1, where you have like someone like K1 from Beast Coast and his Wraith King, everyone else just fighting. But even then, I feel like they're a little bit more fast tempo than the Brazilian ones.
Mm-hmm. So talk about the Brazilian team. The only Brazilian team there is SG Esports, which contains all of your countrymen. That's a team that a lot of people may recognize players from the old Pain Gaming days, and also I suppose from having watched them recently. Is that a very Brazilian team playing in that way that you describe, or are there other particular elements of them we can look out for?
Yeah, I do feel like they will be overall like playing like that. I mean, they are a really good team, so I feel like they might go over this generalization a little bit, but not that much. There are other Brazilian teams, but they're in the lower division. Crewmates is a full Brazilian team, and sorry, Incubus is pretty much a full Brazilian team. They have 4 Brazilians and 1 Argentinian. So I feel like Crewmates and Incubus, they're definitely in that spot that I talked about. SG, they do have international experience. I think they're a little bit more critical. They have a really good coach, so they're kind of not exactly what I said, but they're also a little bit what I said. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, of course. So from those top three, would you have a prediction of who's going to win out of SG, Thunder Predator, and Beast Coast?
I mean, it's rough not to give it to Beast Coast because, like, they did it once. They definitely have the higher pedigree. But I do feel like Thunder Predator is a sleeper, and the same for SG. It's gonna be really rough. I feel like since we didn't really see any of these teams playing right now, it's hard. But I would give it to Beast Coast if I had to bet money.
Okay. And for the remaining 5 teams, so from Infamous, No Ping, Team Unknown, Ego Boys, and LATAM Defenders, are there particular players or teams there which you think could push into that top 3, or is it very clearly delineated for you?
Okay, so my dark horse for all of these teams is actually Team Unknown. No one was really talking that much about them unless you actually followed the South America region pretty closely. And I think they are really, really good. It's gonna be a hard journey for them because there's a lot of good teams in the team. But if I had to give to like top 2 to anyone else, it would be Team Unknown. I think they're just they're raw skilled. It's kind of hard to like say anything else about these teams because they don't really have any like international experience. They didn't really win that many tournaments, but they are really good, and it's going to be about which heroes are better. Maybe sometimes a team gets really lucky with patch and stuff like that, or things just click, and I feel like they could be that team.
Are there particular players in Team Unknown that we should be aware of and following?
So yes, there are. I feel like no one is actually gonna know most of them because they were pretty much a lot of the players in this team played for Infamous Young, which was the second team that Infamous had like 2 or 3 years ago. But I'm a big fan of Ouija, which is their position 4. He's Argentinian. Everyone else in the team is Peruvian. And Robo Z is kind of he's more known than everyone else. I think he's a great mid player. And he definitely carries a lot of their games. So yeah, I would probably say they're 2 and they're 4, Robo Z and Ouija.
Okay. And from this top division, are there teams that you would expect to be struggling with relegation, or do you think it's quite close?
I feel like, I mean, it was a really tough spot for the last slot in the upper division. LATAM Defenders, if I'm not mistaken, played against Incubus. And even though LATAM Defenders won, I actually felt like it was more like Incubus lost more than LATAM won. So I feel like it's going to be a really tough spot for them. They're a good team. I don't think they don't deserve to be in the upper division, but they're against really good players, and they might be in the bottom of these teams. If I had to give to
Sorry, if you wanted to see them kick on, is there anything you'd like to see them be able to do? Anything they need to improve on?
So, like from what I remember, I definitely felt like their decisions in the mid game were overall really shaky. Like they would get Roche, and then like they would win a fight at Roche, and then they would smoke, even though some of their cooldowns were not back up, or they knew that the enemy had some cooldowns. I feel like I saw that a lot, where I think they were a little bit too rushy with the way they played. So I would like to see that improve a little bit. And also their carry actually is Brazilian, LATAM Defenders carry. And I really feel like he's a good player, but I've seen him struggle. I've seen like some weird fights. There was this game he was playing Troll where he actually got like a really early BKB, and he didn't press the BKB for 2 fights in a row, and they just lost the game.
Oh dear.
Yeah, like he is a good player, but I've seen like some like small mistakes that cost them games, and that's kind of unacceptable at this level. So hoping to see him, just getting a little bit more crisp in the way he's playing.
And though I interrupted you, but there was another team you were going to mention who you thought might struggle.
Oh yeah, I feel like, I mean, it's kind of rough because the team that's left, is actually Omega, right? I said Unknown is my dark horse. I guess Omega and Infamous are left. I would probably say that Infamous might be bottom, but they're also really good. I'm gonna say that, and I might eat my words because Omega actually they were pretty much they didn't lose almost any games to get to where they are.
Have
So
Omega changed their name? Sorry, they're listed differently.
Oh yeah, sorry, they are
Ego
they
Boys, isn't it?
are Mad Kings now. No, they
It's
are
No
No
Ping,
Ping, right?
Ego Boys,
Yeah.
or No Ping, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Omega is No Ping now, and I would give Infamous the last slot, but that's pretty much because they didn't play any games, so I don't really know what I'm working with here. But yeah, time will tell. I think Latam is like the clear bottom if based on what we know today.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else is kind of shaky. Not really sure
Okay.
about it.
So to close up then, let's have a brief look at the lower division. Are there teams there that you think people should be taking a look at when they're watching lower division games?
Yes, for sure. I feel like Gorilla Pride is. Did Gorilla Pride actually change their org too, or
No,
it's...
they're still Gorilla's Pride. Yeah.
All right, yeah, because there's been like 2 or 3 changes. Yeah, I feel like they are incredibly good, and I also feel like Infinity Esports and Hokori, even though they, they were in the close qualifiers and they got knocked out, I actually think they're really good. So I would say if I had to choose a team to actually go to the upper division, it would probably be Gorilla's Pride, Infinity Esports, or Hokori. I think these guys are incredibly high skilled.
Okay, we'll watch out for them then. And just to close up finally, let's have a look at the matches for week 1 in the South America Up Division. On January the 20th, we've got Beast Coast versus EGB, and No Ping versus SG. On January 22nd, we've got EGB versus LATAM Defenders, and Infamous versus Thunder Predator. And finally, on the 23rd, we've got Beast Coast versus UNK. From those matches, are there any that you would pick that if people can only watch a few?
All right, so actually, can you give me the link? I didn't catch the matches, and I'm fighting them. Jesus Christ.
That's okay.
Oh.
I will send it to you now.
All
Everyone watching is going to see my video slightly mess up, but that's fine. There we go.
Oh, perfect. All right, so let's take a look at this. Because I actually have because these are upper division matches. We're gonna start with the lower division one. So I had all of them in my head, and it just got. All right, so we have Beast Coast EGB, No Ping SG. I would say, even though Beast Coast is my contender for top 1, I wouldn't say the Zigo Boys match is gonna be that hype. I think No Ping versus SG. It's probably going to be up there. I really want to see Infamous versus Thunder Predator because I'm rating Thunder Predator highly. So I want to see how they're going to fare against Infamous. And I if I had to choose like the best one, it would probably be Beast Coast versus Unknown because I'm saying Unknown is my dark horse and stuff. So seeing how they fare against my highest tier team, which is Beast Coast, pretty interesting as well. So okay. I would say Beast Coast versus Unknown. That's probably the best one. But also watch Thunder Predator versus Infamous if you can.
And which ones can we catch you casting on this week?
So I'm mostly gonna be on panel.
Okay.
I am not entirely like we do have we want to cast as well, but because of the way it's all set up, it's not that easy to switch because then like either me or Zayori would have to be like actually running the stream and stuff.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but we will cast some games. I just have absolutely no idea which of these games are gonna be. But we're mostly gonna be on panel. So I mean, I'm gonna be in all games, just not casting mostly.
Wonderful. Well, we'll watch out for you then. But again, thanks for joining me, and I'll speak to you soon.
Oh, all right.
Wonderful. Thank you for watching the DPC show, and thank you for Bowie for filling in for 1337 there to cover the South American region. You can follow Bowie on Twitter, of course, and you should, because he's one of my absolute favourite analysts, and I'm looking forward to seeing him do more stuff. It's great to see him starting to get the level of opportunities he deserves. But he can be found on Twitter. I can never remember people's Twitter. It's just D2 Bowie, as in Dota 2 Bowie, but D2 Bowie on Twitter. So follow him there. Anyway, thanks again so much for watching the first episode of the DPC show. This is going to be, in the future, releasing every week on every single Monday until the DPC ends, or until the world dies from just generally exploding. So we're going to be here every single week. Please share it around. This is a new project, of course, for me. I've put a huge amount of work into it, so I really appreciate whatever anyone can do to help this get around everywhere and help this be more widely watched and become a staple of the community. If there's anything you'd like changed about the way I do this, or any feedback you have about the presentation of this show, please feel free to let me know. Obviously, this is something of a work in progress. I think all my analysts have done an absolutely brilliant job. I just want to learn how to facilitate them the best that I can. So please feel free to send me any feedback to help improve this show. I want this to be the best possible product it can be. Next week, of course, we're going to be returning with the same analysts on Monday, as I said. 1437 will be back. So that should all be exciting. But keep out on there. Again, if you want to follow me on Twitter to see further updates about this or my other podcast, Position 6, which is a Dota 2 interview podcast, you can follow me on Twitter at Daniel Offen, and that's spelled Daniel and then O-F-F-E-N. But I'll also pop a link to that in the episode description as well, if you'd like to just click something rather than having to type. But anyway, until then, until next week, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.